Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
The old boat stood dead weight in the garage, and Lisa sat pensively in the front, in the small wooden triangle at the bow. This boat had been made by Dad himself when he was still young, a long, long time ago. He used to take meticulous care of it, painting it every spring with new varnish, touching up and fixing things. Lisa used to come here to visit the boat when she was homesick for her father. As a child, she loved to sit like this on the very edge of the boat, and it seemed to her that she was not riding on the boat, but flying low over the water, like an Indian goddess, sitting on an invisible flying mat. It had been 5 years since Daddy had been gone, and now there was no one to look after the old boat. Lisa's husband, the jovial joker John, has no interest in the boat. He has little interest in anything but beer and soccer. Is she so wrong about him? A few years ago, trying to please her, the daughter of an academic, he took her to theaters, classical concerts, dressed in costumes, and listened to Wagner with her and her father. And then, when they got married, he listened to Wagner for a while too, though Lisa was already well aware that he didn't need it at all. And now he watched soccer downstairs and drank beer every night. No, Lisa didn't mind at all, to each his own, but why did he have to pretend like that? Now she was disgusted by his pretense and wanted to leave so that she wouldn't see him sitting in her father's favorite chair, with his feet up on the low antique table, eating fish on the newspaper, throwing the scales right on the floor, and drinking beer with his friend Kevin, who came to their cottage from the city almost every weekend. Lisa went away, upstairs in the attic, and painted her still lifes there. Peonies, poppies, field cornflowers in big empty jugs or in light transparent bottles. Her friend Molly, a classmate, came to visit her from the city too. She and Molly had been friends since childhood, since first grade, and they knew everything about each other and shared their deepest secrets. Molly was her complete opposite. Lisa is fragile, shy, was very sickly as a child, missed school every now and then, came down with another sore throat. Molly is athletic, tall, sturdy, bullied, always able to stand up for herself. They sat at the same desk, and Molly, seeing how Draws in Notebook's dreamy neighbor, admired from the bottom of her heart. "Wow, how do you do it?" "I don't know." Lisa shrugged her shoulders. "I just see it in my head and repeat it." "You're an artist." Molly said affirmatively, and this statement defined Lisa's future profession. She did go to art school after 9th grade, and then to the famous Watercolor Academy. Now she herself was already a teacher at this academy, and Molly was a successful coach master of sports in athletics. So different, they nevertheless always found something to talk about and continued to be friends, although it would seem what they could have in common. Molly, the daughter of intelligent parents in a city apartment, my mother even had a servant, my father was an academician of the Russian Academy of Sciences, a respected man, and my mother was also a famous musician, played the piano, taught at the conservatory, and at home gave open lessons. Now there is no mom, no dad, there is only one Lisa and Molly, a loyal, reliable friend on whom you can always rely. Not adapted in the domestic plan, Lisa, she always helped out, at least to get tickets, at least a big cleaning at the cottage, everything. All this was organized by Molly, and many other things too. Lisa just couldn't do without Molly, and John was terribly angry at first when they first started living together. "What's she doing here all the time? Doesn't she have her own things to do?" "Why do you do that, John?" Lisa answered with a slight reproachful tone. "She's my friend. We're practically like sisters, you know." "But I married you." John continued to resent her. "Not that sister of yours. Whenever I come home, She's right there, unashamedly lying on our bed. How is that even possible? And she comes out of the bathroom in your robe. I thought she was you from the back the other day. She's sitting at the table by the mirror, with your bath turban on her head, a robe and a mask on her face. I couldn't make it out in the bright light. I came closer. I wanted to hug her, and she started laughing. What, honey? Did you get it wrong? Anyway, you do what you want, but it's got to stop. John went on, I don't want to live in a threesome, and I hope you don't either. That's disgusting. Lisa corrected herself squeamishly. I'm sure you misunderstood her. Molly's just a fun person who likes to joke. You know, she has a hard time at home. So what? You don't want her to pray with us? I know. John waved me off. Come on, let her. Just tell her to shut up or something. But that was a long time ago. The first year or two of their life together. Then John got used to this state of affairs and didn't mind when Molly fried pancakes in their kitchen or washed windows to help Lisa, who suffered from vertigo. Molly's own home wasn't exactly sweet. She lived in a tiny 2-room apartment with her mother, a half-paralyzed grandmother, and an alcoholic father in the farthest and dustiest factory industrial district. Lisa and the whole family always felt very sorry for her and tried to help her, to buy her a dress, a blouse for holidays, or groceries, ashamed to embarrass her if she seemed inappropriate. Father, bringing tickets to various children's events, Christmas trees, theaters, concerts, and making out vouchers to pioneer camps, never forgot about his daughter's girlfriend, and Molly and Lisa were everywhere together. As they grew older and their interests and studies grew, they were separated a bit. Lisa traveled to gliders with her school, Molly to training camps and competitions, but when they met after separation, they couldn't talk enough. Now that Lisa and John lived mostly in the country, Molly lived in their city apartment, and it was better for her to have a break from annoying relatives and to look after the living space. On weekends, she, if there was no competition or traveling, came to visit them. Molly was not married, nor did she aspire to be. She said with a laugh, good men have long ago all taken away. You, Lisa, lucky. You are always lucky. You are happy, and such as me, apparently not supposed to. She laughed gaily, trying to hide her sadness, and immediately rushed either to do the dishes or to cook something delicious in Lisa's big, beautiful kitchen. I'll be there for you, like a pet. Molly laughed when Lisa convinced her that she would find her destiny. Molly, you're so sweet. Lisa hugged her, barely reaching her tall friend. You're like family to me. Do you want me to ask John to introduce you to someone at work? No. Molly shook her head. That's kind of silly. If fate throws up a bow, so be it. And if not, well, I'll be with you my age to roost. She laughed again and kissed her friend on the cheek. Cheer up, Lisa. As if Lisa were the one who had been deprived of her fate, and not she herself. Molly was not in today. 2 days ago, she had left for another training camp to train young athletes, and in a few days Lisa herself was leaving for practice, for nature, as the artist said, also to train children to paint landscapes. It was stuffy in the bright attic, and the dust flew, spiraling in the sunlight. Lisa suddenly felt so wistful. She got up from behind her easel, stretched, and opened the door. She could still hear the muffled muttering of the television from downstairs, but no one was yelling as loud as they could. Goal, goal. Apparently, the broadcast of the soccer match had already finished, and John and Kevin, just sitting around drinking beer, and the TV was muttering to itself. Lisa went downstairs to pour herself some tea and found that no one was in the spacious kitchen living room anymore. She turned off the TV, put the kettle on, and went outside and by the garage she saw a startling sight: her own husband and Kevin, a friend of hers, pulling Dad's boat out into the light of day and busily working on it. Lisa smiled happily. "It's beautiful. I guess I was wrong to underestimate him. So what if it's beer? He can if he wants to." Happy, she ran down the steps and past the flower beds. Molly did her best. Who else could? Walked to the garage. "John, are you fixing the boat?" "Uh-huh," nodded her husband. "I've had enough of it sitting in the garage. You said you wanted to go for a ride. Work here, of course, a lot, but nothing. When you get back from your internship, Molly will be here. We'll go for a ride on the pond, and Kevin won't mind, right, man?" He elbowed his friend in the side. He grinned. "Why not?" Lisa sat down in a deck chair in the garden and sat happily, half closing her eyes, dozing off and watching the guys fiddling with the boat. "How happy I am after all," she thought. All her bad mood due to her husband's unkempt habits, his dislike for what constituted her interests, flew away into that blue June sky on which white fluffy clouds lazily crept. All people are different, Lisa thought. Molly and I aren't alike, and we've been friends almost all our lives. John has a right to live his life the way he likes. What am I saying? The main thing is that we love each other, and she gave herself a promise not to get irritated over nothing and not to demand too much from those close to her. When Lisa arrived home after practice, cheerful and a little tired, her nose burnt to a red-brown color, she found that Molly had beaten her to it. "And I'm back a couple days ahead of you," reported her friend, hugging the slim Lisa tightly. "Oh, let me in." Lisa laughed. "Your bones are cracking. You'll break them. You track and field athlete." Molly had already prepared an amazing dinner for her arrival. The men, John and Kevin, had roasted the meat. They opened a bottle of light white wine for her and Molly and drank beer as usual, but then also brandy, sweet for tea, said chuckling John, opening a bottle from his father's old stock. Lisa wanted to be indignant because they had agreed not to touch her father's bar unless it was absolutely necessary, but she restrained herself. And today was just such an occasion. They were waiting for her. They were trying, and she was going to make a showdown. Why did they open a collector's cognac? It's low. Dad would have said so. It's low and ugly. In the morning after breakfast, John, Molly, and Kevin, blindfolding her with a kerchief, solemnly led her to the pond, said surprise. Smiling Lisa guessed, of course, what the surprise was, but she didn't let on. She was trying to play the game of surprise and curiosity, but when they took off her handkerchief for a laugh, 3 times around its axis, Lisa did not pretend to aghast. My God, what a miracle! On the quay stood, barely bobbing on the water, a boat shining with new turquoise paint, and the inscription on the side, Elizabeth, in dark brown ochre, stood out brightly, flashing against the glossy azure. "Thank you, thank you." She threw herself around John's neck and then hugged her friend tightly and even kissed the cheek of an embarrassed Kevin, who was blushing with embarrassment. "Thank you, guys." Wait, there's more." And Molly ceremoniously handed her a large cardboard box. "Is it just me or is it someone's birthday today, huh?" "Happy birthday." The boys cheered and popped a bottle of champagne. Barely breathing, Lisa pulled a tiny kitten out of the box. "Oh my God, Molly," her eyes filled with tears. "Oh, it's so cute. Do you like it?" Molly perked up. "You ask." Lisa clutched the baby to her chest. "How wonderful you are, how fluffy." "He's tricolored, see." Molly proudly pointed her finger at the tiny body. "I'm told tricolored brings happiness. I'm already the happiest in the world." Lisa almost burst into tears of delight and emotion. "I have you so. All right, all right." She was stopped by her friend. "We're the best, of course." And she laughed, throwing back her head, loudly, joyfully, reminding something of a prancing horse. And now sitting, as in her childhood, on the bow of the boat that had come back to life, Lisa felt a deep sense of peace. How good it felt! Her daddy's old favorite boat, which he had once given her when she was 5 years old for her birthday, pretentiously and lavishly named Elizabeth, was back in service. Here she is silently gliding on the water surface of the pond, cutting through the cassava, algae, breaking through the thickets of lilies. "Oh, look, a kingfisher!" And another one, and another one. Lisa laughed happily, showing her friends a flock of bright azure birds that flew up in a scattering of jewels near the shore. There were always their nests here, I remember. How long had it been since she had ridden like this on this old pond? What a magical beauty it is here. Hey on the boat. Suddenly it sounded nearby. Watch out! Cutting through the calm, standing water, a motorboat was rushing towards them, roaring and blasting fountains of spray with its propeller, leaving behind a real whirlpool. Look out! The motorboat was getting closer and closer. Lisa stared at the flying jet ski in amazement, and at some point she realized that it was going to hit them. "Stop! Stop!" she screamed, and their own boat, already rocking on the waves, raised by the motorboat and shaking left and right. She was sitting in a Turkish way, as in her childhood, and frantically grabbed the side with her hand. John was yelling and cursing at the top of his voice, waving his oar, trying to push off and avoid a collision. The guy sitting in the motorboat, diving goggles halfway down his face, disheveled gray hair, some kind of tattered t-shirt, was desperately twisting the wheel and yelling back. "It's jammed! Turn, turn, turn." Boom, terrible jolt, noise, crack. Lisa, unable to keep her balance, falls into the water, very near the dreaded spinning propeller. Lisa screams terribly, hides in the depths, and the calm, bright water in the pond is colored a sickening dark red. No, no! As if through a thick blanket, she hears Molly's shrill scream. And she tries to scream something herself, but draughty cold water pours into her mouth, into her nose, into her throat, into her lungs, and a bright flash explodes in her head, and a terrible tearing pain and darkness. One continuous impenetrable darkness and silence, no pain, no sounds, no nothing. Bright lights, huge lamps, terrible cold. Why is it so cold? Scary creatures wearing the same huge glasses halfway down their faces, the other half not visible either, swathed in white cloth. Pain, eerie, still developing in two. Lisa wants to scream at the top of her voice again, but only a suppressed mooing comes out. She's awake, add anesthesia. Warmth envelops her, the bright light is veiled by a white cloth, the jackhammer is no longer pounding in her head. Good, she can sleep. Lisa didn't finally regain consciousness until a week after the accident at the pond. She had been kept in a medically induced coma the whole time. The painful shock of the terrible injuries was too great. A motorboat propeller had severely damaged her spine and almost ripped off one foot. At the clinic where she was brought, an old surgeon, a friend of Lisa's father, seeing in the patient's chart her rare middle name, worriedly poked his finger. "This is not the daughter of Academician Vishnevsky. We do not know." The residents waved their hands. The surgeon ordered to make inquiries. At the post asked the relatives, and the information was confirmed. It was indeed Elizabeth, the daughter of the same academician. "Hang in there, Lisa," said the doctor. "You'll make it, no matter what it costs me." It cost both her and the doctor a week and a half without rest and almost no sleep. Lisa was under anesthesia and on tranquilizers the entire time. The surgeon on cigarettes and coffee. But in the end, he managed to get her out and reattach her foot and reassemble her spine. Now all we had to do was wait to see if it worked or not. Where are her relatives? With red, watery eyes, the surgeon came out of the operating room. Let them know it was a success. Tomorrow, if it's an uneventful night, we can move her to intensive care. Molly and John were sitting in the spacious country kitchen of the academician's house and drinking beer when the phone rang and John was informed that his wife had been successfully operated on for the third and final time, and now all they had to do was wait for her to wake up. Will she walk? Concerned, John asked. He was told that it was too early to say anything about that. Shit. John threw the phone on the couch. Survivor. Molly was silent and concentrating on chewing crab chips. Finally, wiping her hands with a napkin and taking a sip from her bottle, she looked up with angry eyes. I told you not to call an ambulance, motherfucker. She threw the empty bottle at the sideboard. The polished wood gave a resounding thump. The bottle shattered into splinters, and the antique glassware on top of it clinked pitifully. Look out, rumbled John. Don't beat up the antiques. Fuck you. Spit on the floor, Molly, with your antiques. What? Did you bite it? She's alive. Your wife is alive. And still wakes up, calculates everything herself or with someone else's help, and will throw us out of here. And that's only in the best case, in the best case. Already Molly was yelling, out of fear and rage. And if you coward had done as I said, we would be in the chocolate now, yes. Calm down, Molly. John walked over to her and put his arm around her shoulders as she sat in the padded chair. Molly, let's not do this, okay? We're so good together. We'll think of something. I already have a plan, Molly. I mean, think about it. What would we look like if we hadn't called an ambulance right away? I'd be in jail right now, and I'd be dead. We have to be careful, you know. Careful, step by step. Okay, Molly has softened up a bit. But what about this one? What if it cracks? No, John said firmly. He's already there. And he shook his head vaguely. They won't get him from that side. No one will even look for him. She's an academic's daughter, for crying out loud, said Molly. Yes, they will. Nobody cares about that academician now. Shook his head, John. Don't be so naive. There will be questions we will close, just as with no. But where will you get so much? Now this house and apartment and everything else that's there is hers again, or rather, yours never was. It didn't work out. It will work out, you'll see. John winked. Don't worry, you can count on me. He hugged Molly again and kissed her. Shall we go and relieve some stress? No way, she half-jokingly fought back, but after a few minutes she changed her mood, and the sweet couple went up the stairs to the second-floor bedroom. The large window opposite Lisa's bed accommodated little. A sprawling old poplar tree, stitched over the top with power line wires, and the slice of sky on the side. That was all. The night landscape differed from the day landscape in that the tangled mesh of poplar branches lit up the lanterns of the hospital square and drained an unsettling bright yellow light. Lisa was afraid to look at these distant lights shivering in the darkness, and she asked the nurses to close the blinds. The tattered one had another seizure. The nurses and orderlies spoke to each other and shook their understanding heads. Go, give her an injection. Lisa was brought a thick syringe on gauze, lying in an iron cuvette, bent in an irregular oval, and a painful injection was given through a catheter. Afterward, it felt as if a burning, tissue-spreading poison had entered the vein. But after a minute, the sensation passed. The whole body was covered with a relaxed and pleasant languor, and there was peace at last. All day long, Lisa waited for this evening injection, and already at dusk, she began to worry. Why don't they light the lanterns? It was already time. It would soon be dark. Would you look at them? She asked the nurse. I can't see very well. They'll light up. They'll light up. A kind old woman calmed her down. They'll light up in 20 minutes. How could they not? These 20 minutes seemed like an eternity to Lisa, and she twisted in the bunk as much as she could, but she could only move her arms and head. She couldn't feel her lower part at all. Finally, the damn lights would come on, and after another half hour, the cherished injection would come. That was it. One could sleep and think of nothing, sleep until morning, or better yet, until next year, or quite well, fall asleep and never wake up again. Where she would wake up, there would again be fear, pain, uncertainty, dread of the future, and the bitter, piercing thought, why don't John and Molly come to see her? It's only been 3 days since they put you in intensive care. The nurse comforted her. We can't yet, Germs. Your husband calls every day, asking how you are. What's wrong with you? Don't you worry, my dear. Soon he'll come to see you and prescribe new medications. Sam, respectfully called the junior medical staff of the chief surgeon, the pride and luminary of the whole hospital, and the unquestionable authority of the doctor expressed in the fact that the name of the patronymic he almost never called, only said respectfully. He did the operation himself, he said it himself, he appointed it himself. And if suddenly the newcomers, not having found out the local subordination, suddenly asked, for example, and who is your chief here? They answered without any thought as to how it would sound to the untrained ear. What do you mean who himself? He himself came the day after tomorrow, as promised by the nurse, and for a long time tapped Lisa's legs with a hammer, put sensors and spun wheels, and looked at the monitor screen, frowning and dictating something curtly to the attentive and diligent assistant. Left sinus, no activity. Right sinus, minimal activity. Contraction interval, rhythm frequency, and other words and expressions incomprehensible to anyone but doctors. The surgeon sighed and sat down on the chair next to Lisa. How are you, Lisa? Scared, the girl admitted. Samuel, am I going to stay lying down forever? It is still very early to make any predictions. The doctor answered her evasively. Believe me, honey, I did everything I could. And I can do a lot, especially when it comes to the daughter of my old friend. But now you must also try, calm down first of all. Our nerves decide almost everything in such cases. Our attitude, you know, sweetheart? Yes, Lisa nodded. I understand. Well, come on, calm down. Don't think about bad things. I've put you back together in one piece. Do you really think it takes 2 days to put the pieces back together? He stroked her head affectionately. No, it's a long process. It takes a long rehab, a very long rehab. Now get some sleep, get some sleep. And when you wake up, change your bad mood, got it? I'll come back in 3 days to check on you. The surgeon wagged a pretend finger. Watch me. The door closed behind him and his assistant, and with them the faint hope that had been born in Lisa's heart also closed, hid somewhere, like a skittish cat, in the linen closet, and never showed itself again. Samuel. The receptionist stopped the doctor in the corridor. The investigator is there, he asks. When can we interview the patient from the 5th ward? Not now. Abruptly through the doctor. Let him come later. But he will not leave, will he?" "Begrudgingly," said the girl. "We'll say the exact date, name, and everything. Tell him that the patient is on tranquilizers, the injury is very serious, and no testimony she cannot give now." Molly sat in the garden on Lisa's favorite chaise lounge and pondered. A brilliant plan to eliminate Lisa, who was annoying them both, had failed. And why had this worm proved so tenacious? How long, how carefully Molly had thought and planned everything. How many sleepless nights she spent preparing for this crucial day. What was it worth to find the right man, capable of such a deed, and even to ensure his disappearance? The entire huge consumer loan that John had taken out had been spent on these preparations. And there you have it. It's all gone. Shoo! She threw away the colorful kitten that had been lurking under her feet since the day they had so carefully prepared to celebrate Lisa's birthday. The kitten, mewing pitifully, jumped aside and disappeared into the flower bed among the lushly blooming peonies and lupines. After lunch, she and John had to go into town, to the hospital, and pretend love and friendship again. Damn it, Molly sighed heavily. She was so sick of this. All her life, for as long as she could remember, she'd had to adapt, lie and twist to survive. In the filthy room of the wooden house where she lived with her out-of-her-mind grandmother, it was necessary to ignore the stench and mess from an early age. Her grandmother often went under herself in her sleep, and also dragged some kind of junk from the dumps and spread it around in all the corners. In the next room, a little larger, lived Molly's parents, Father Alcatch and Mother, tortured, exhausted, aged before her time, factory worker. When Molly first went to kindergarten, she, like most children, cried. In a clean, shining group, and kind-hearted teachers consoled her, "Molly, do not cry. After lunch you will go home, your mother will come for you. Don't cry." But little Molly kept sobbing and sobbing. She did not want to go home at all. Here in this abode of cleanliness and comfort, where it was so wonderful, tasty food from clean plates, and you could play as much as you want with new, standing on the shelves stacked, as in the store toys, she would gladly stay to live. No, no. Molly screamed throughout the locker room when her mother came to pick her up in the afternoon. The first week, they didn't leave the babies until the evening so they could adapt better. "I don't want to. I don't want to go home." "What is it with the child?" Marveled educators. "All crying want to go home, and she wants to stay with us. I guess it is not good for her at home," summarized an elderly, experienced nanny. "Look at her mother. A poor woman, you can see it right away." Caretakers looked closely, and in a few days it became quite clear how things are in Molly's family. The father is unemployed, kicked out for drunkenness. Mother's in a forging factory, working double shifts. Plus, they also have a half-wit grandmother, said quietly educator, neighbor Molly parents. "They have such an odor from their apartment. At least take out the image. If they open the door when I go out into the entrance, I try not to even breathe. How do they live?" The teacher grabbed her head. "We have to report them to the guardianship office." 100 times reported, waved away the neighbor. They came and looked. The family is complete. The mother works, does not drink, does not smoke, so there's no reason to take the child away. And the fact that the father mortgages and the grandmother with her keeping, so is that a reason? Half the country has such fathers, and the grandmother is sick. Where is she going? They'll warn the mother to take better care of her, and that's it. That's how it is. Educators, pitying little Molly, at the same time and horrified, complaining to each other during the shift change. It's something impossible, ashamed to say. Molly was brought in again in the same underpants. Imagine her mother just turning them inside out and everything. God, How will the poor child grow up in such conditions? In the end, the pedagogical council of the kindergarten found a way out. Cautiously advised Molly mother, arrange a daughter in a boarding school. The head volunteered to help. She convinced Molly mother. The children are very good there. There are children with developmental delays, of course, but not heavy, do not think. It is a garden for those who have difficult family circumstances. On weekends, you can take the girl home to the family, and you will be easier. Molly's mother didn't think for long, and after a month little Molly finally found a peaceful shelter. To think, from this daycare center, one didn't have to go home. Bye, Mommy. Calmly, the 4-year-old turned her back to her mother and waved goodbye. I'm going. Even on weekends, she categorically refused to go home, and the educators on duty did not object to such company. The girl was a rare, independent, and sober-minded. In addition, all the forces tried to help the nannies, only if it would not give her home from here and collected dishes and dusted and toys all neatly arranged, even the commission to bring, do not come to mind. A little master began and other children to call other children to order. Built and leveled the entire group like a real educator. Well, this girl will not be lost. Teachers grinned. No one will not give down, only to achieve their own. Molly really did not give, neither on the internet, nor at school, and even more so in the sports section. Strong, well-developed physically, she in the 2nd grade herself enrolled in the judo section, and by the 6th was already a master of sports in the junior category. From now on, she was not afraid of her father's anger. After she laid her father with a clever trick near the toilet, when he threatened to drown her head in the toilet bowl for some offense, as he had done many times before, Molly became a person untouchable in the house. She marked her new status by throwing her grandmother out of her room, along with her missing urine, bunk, and other filthy belongings. I don't want her ever coming back here again. Screaming all over the apartment. It's a shithole. Molly's mother, seeing this state of affairs, with shaking hands put the grandmother in a tiny pantry, but she didn't care anymore. She had no idea who she was or where she was. Molly was very active. She got long rubber gloves and dry bleach from the school cleaner and cleaned the whole apartment to a shine, including the toilet with a stinking years unwashed toilet, and the bathroom and the kitchen, barely visible through the cigarette smoke and grease. I rewashed the shabby curtains, threw out all the junk, and at the end of it, I hit on my father. If I see you come home with a bottle again, I'll soak you till you bleed, with these hands, understand, and I'll add my feet. Drink your drink wherever you want, and you can die there at the same time. My father remained silent, hiccuping and writhing convulsively. The grandmother mumbled something behind the curtain in the pantry, and the mother, going into the kitchen, where Molly was concentrating on cooking something in open pots, sank down on a stool in tears. I've got a daughter of some sort, and that was all that a semi-literate, battered by fate, and an alcoholic husband, the woman was capable of expressing her feelings. Don't worry, Mammy, Molly hugged her. You know how we will live now. And they did heal in a new way. The father, who drank the last of his health, was afraid to openly contact his determined daughter. Grandmother's movements on the garbage dumps stopped simply on simply not letting her out of the apartment. Molly almost forcibly took her mother to the authorities for certificates and to the social services, where they wrote out free diapers for a sick old woman, medicines and more allowance, in the form of some change and dry rations for the holidays. On these small transfers, Molly immediately got her paws on them. Without me, you would never have gotten them in your life. They will be for my pocket money. Having thus arranged her life, Perky Molly began further transformations, passed the standards for the Olympic reserve, and entered the sports school. It was necessary to go to hell on the heels, on the other side of the city in the distance. But could such nonsense stop an armored, battle-hardened tank named Molly? More persistent than this girl was not a student, and by the end of the school year, she was already the head of the student council of the sports school, was the captain of the volleyball team, a prize winner of school, city and world competitions, and among the best, was going to the training camp in Bulgaria. Look me! She threatened her relatives that in my absence, everything was tip-top. I'll come and check. And on you, I'll find a solution. Don't worry. This is separate to her father. The next day, she brought home a guy, 3 years older, who put a lock on Molly's room. That's it. The border is locked, she grinned. No one gets in, no one gets through. Signed her mother's application for school, and closing her door, rolled away for a month and a half to Bulgaria. Thus, in the 7th grade, the paths of Molly, an athlete, the daughter of an alki and a semi-literate worker, and Lisa, an excellent student and artist, academically blue-blooded, could have separated forever, but something kept them close to each other. Perhaps it was the preferential treatment and gifts raining down on Molly from the generosity of Lisa's academic father, or perhaps it was the sincere light of hope and affection that lit up in Lisa's eyes at the sight of her beloved friend, or, for example, the pleasure of visiting a rich, cozy house where Lisa's mother, always carefully dressed and combed, sat with a book or knitting, near a large window and smiled, slightly squinting her beautiful eyes. Girls, go wash your hands. Nancy made pudding for lunch today. And Nancy, a full-blown, ruddy-haired girl, happily bringing out of the sparkling clean kitchen incredibly delicious dishes. And how do people cook such things? And all this decent, comfortable, real life in which she, Molly, admitted only as a guest, over the years growing up and gaining experience, Molly more and more often began to ask herself the question, and why is it that some people have everything and others have nothing? Why not she, Molly, had such a rich house, delicious food, servants, and no problems, and the sickly, weak, and weak-willed, as Molly thought, Lisa? Well, yes, she had been lucky in life. She was born the daughter of an academic, but why does it always have to be that way? She is Molly, 100 times more worthy of a good life than this unfit, whiny worm who can't do anything useful. She can't cook, of course, all the maid and Mom did, and she's afraid to get her thin, weak fingers dirty with anything but her lousy, useless paints. She can hardly even pay the rent. Since her parents are gone, all household chores have fallen on Molly's shoulders. Look, Lisa showed her the piece of paper Lisa had thrown in the mailbox. It says it's time to have the meters checked. What's that? I don't even know who to call. Come on. Smiling indulgently, Molly tucked the folded paper into her pocket. I'll go to the housekeeping department next week. I'll have to make an application there. It's like that with everything. Absolutely everything. It got a little easier when that foolish fool somehow managed to get married. Molly herself had long since given up those silly teenage dreams. Here she will meet a beautiful prince who will solve all her financial problems and take her to a beautiful future on a white horse, that is, in a Mercedes, of course. In fact, the Prince Charming, at least the ones that Molly came across, needed only one thing. And that didn't include solving her problem and organizing a happy future. And where was she to get so much self-control and intelligence not to show the princess her immense strength, both physical and volitional? Those beautiful princes who hung out in rich restaurants and nightclubs, as well as hanging around at concerts and conservatories, were out of reach for her. She had it all obviously painted on her face. Here is a girl from the working class, and to take from her nothing, except for the very thing that interests any prince, only disposable. When Molly finally realized this, she was angry, really angry, terribly angry, to the point of a tugging pain in her knuckles. It turned out that she, who had everything, and worldly intelligence and wit, and the strength to twist any of the refined rich bastards into a ram's horn, would not see this beautiful life as their ears. And despite her athletic accomplishments, she'll never make it into high society. Why did she end up going down a slippery and criminal path? After all, she could have made her way further, to the top of the sports Olympus, where international champions sharply start upwards on a high-speed social elevator, getting at once everything that only the soul desires, and money, and status, and recognition. She probably would have made it in the end, but what prevented her was the black malice and envy that filled her corrupted heart. In the first adult season, not her, but another girl from a well-to-do and successful family, was chosen as a candidate for a major international competition. And since then, Molly finally disbelieved in the possibility of achieving something worthwhile, solely by their own efforts, but the need for this achievement, all sharpened her from the inside, eating her soul, did not give peace of mind to live. And so the fate of her poor friend Lisa was already sealed. Finally, Black Molly's plan took shape on the day when John, Lisa's newly married husband, mistook her for his young wife in the luxurious bathroom of their city apartment. That year, the last year of Lisa's father's life, bedridden with an incurable ailment, she and John became secret lovers. And Lisa didn't notice anything, living, as she always did, in her perfectly made-up world of rosy dreams. You keep an eye on him. Begging, she said to her friend as she left for the plain air, referring to her husband. Men are so unfit. You're the one who's unfit. Molly thought and smiled sweetly and replied, of course, darling. Don't worry. Drive safely. In fact, 4 of the 6 years of Lisa's marriage, they had already lived as a threesome, a kind of Swedish family, with the only difference being that one of the family members was unaware of this state of affairs. The hospital lobby was crowded. During visiting hours, relatives and friends came in droves to see the patients. Here and there, they unwrapped packages, rustling cellophane bags and paper wrappers showed the strict nurse the food brought and sighing, put aside, not allowed to transfer things. Where to? John was confused, looking around. To the 3rd trauma, through the gatehouse, right to the elevator, and then to the 3rd floor. Molly said, you were told, remember? How do you keep it all in your head? John was amazed and obediently followed. When Molly approached the room, she took out a bouquet of country flowers, elegantly tied with a ribbon. Here, hand it over. She shoved it to her companion, and with a smile on her face, she sailed into the room. Hello, little girl, stretching the words and fondly fussing, as with a baby, gently hugged her friend. How are you, dear? We were so worried about you. Nothing, it's nothing. Lisa smiled weakly. It's so good that you finally came. They only let me in today. Molly made unhappy eyes. I was ready to tear them all to shreds, and she laughed at her own joke. Lisa smiled through her own strength, too. I know you can do anything. John swallowed convulsively, white as a sheet at the sight of his wife lying helplessly on the hospital bed, with no blood in her face, her transparent arms stretched out along her torso, and came quietly closer. Honey, here are your favorite flowers. I was so worried. Thank you. Lisa's eyes brightened for a moment at the sight of John and the flowers. Thank you, darling. Do you remember anything about what happened?" Molly asked cautiously, looking into her friend's face. Lisa's features were distorted with suffering. Memories of the terrible pain came all at once. She closed her eyes and sighed convulsively, trying to cope with the panic that had built up. No. She shook her head and pulled her hand heavy to her temple. "Later, it's all a blur." Okay, Molly muttered fearfully. "Don't. I'm sorry. Let's not talk about it just yet." She stroked Lisa's thin arm affectionately. It's all behind you now. Soon you'll be quite well. You'll come home. We'll put you on the veranda. It's nice and fresh there. You'll watch the leaves fall. And how is Trishka?" Lisa suddenly asked, opening her eyes. "Who?" Molly didn't understand. "My kitten, Trishka. I named him Tricolor, Aka Tricolor." Lisa explained. "That's why it's Tricolor." "Eh?" Molly stretched out, smiling. "There's nothing wrong with that kitten. He's already ripping the curtains in the kitchen. He's cute." Lisa's eyes shone warmly. "How I want to pet him." "You will." Molly promised. "You will. Don't you worry about anything." John sat down on the edge of the bed and kissed his wife on the forehead. "We're fine, and so is Trishka. Your students have already cut all the wires." He grinned. "They call, they come, they ask when they can visit you. They wish you a speedy recovery, of course. Tell them that I love them all very much." Lisa said softly, "Very much. And I love you too. What would I do without you both?" She looked at her two favorite people, her husband and her friend, and sighed contentedly. "Seeing you made my heart feel better. We'll come back often now." Molly promised. "Soon you'll be able to eat everything. I'll make you some cakes. I really want your pies." Lisa smiled. "You're my sunshine. I just don't know how much more I can take." Molly exhaled as she left the room. "I'm exhausted. You'll get through this." John patted her on the shoulder. "You're strong. Too strong." Molly thought bitterly. "I'm so sick of this. Let's go have a smoke," she said to her lover. "We still have to go to the investigator tomorrow." For the first time they were questioned almost immediately on the day when everything happened. The turmoil, the general shouting, Kevin's eyes bulging with fear. They needed him with them as an impartial witness, which was why they'd invited him from out of town. The scurrying and frightened dacha neighbors, the ambulance shrill, shrieking with all its sirens. You don't need to call anyone. Drop the call." Quietly and insistently, Molly said to the frightened John, while he was frantically poking at the buttons of his phone. At the same time, on the grass, covered with Lisa's fresh blood, a dazed Kevin was trying to give her CPR. He dragged her, mangled and bloody, to the shore, yelling and cursing at her and interspersing his shouts with a foul language. "Don't you understand?" John hissed at Molly. "Now the neighbors will call an ambulance. Look what a crowd. And the police will call too. What will I say later that I couldn't get through? No, this is how it's going to be. Look at her. Can she really wake up after something like that?" And with shaky hands, he pulled a cigarette out of the pack. "Lisa." Molly, pretending to be desperate, threw herself again to her friend lying on the grass, seeing the neighbors running around. What on earth was going on? Who thought to put this rusty iron on the water? The guy who was driving the motorboat had disappeared, and now it was rolling on the water from side to side, standing, banging the engine not turned off near the shore, kicking up sand and green cassava. Somebody. Molly begged, "Turn off that damn motorboat, for God's sake." The man's neighbors immediately went to turn it off, and after a while earned the curses of the operatives who arrived on the scene. Why the hell did they get in the boat? Now they've got all the fingerprints covered. They didn't know there were no prints because the hired kid was driving the boat, wearing the thin and transparent nitrile gloves Molly had given him. It was impossible to see this fact from afar, and nobody remembered his appearance. Dark hair, I think. Kevin said uncertainly. Shaggy and crazy eyes. Have you seen this man before? We asked all the eyewitnesses one by one. No, they were shaking their heads, and so was Kevin. Never seen here, never seen anything like this at our dachas. He looked like an Armenian or an Azerbaijani, Kevin recalled, wrinkling his forehead, or maybe a Tajik or a Korean. The operative smirked. I don't know. The interviewee was confused. It was far away at first, and then no one looked at him. So what was wrong with his eyes? The question was directed at Molly. He was wearing glasses. She told the operatives confidently. Big diving goggles, so I don't know what kind of eyes were under there. She spread her hands and suddenly howled thinly and pitifully, like a she-wolf who lost her Volchenka. Find him, find him. I beg you. Find the bastard. Lisa, my friend. She's like a sister to me, you know. Molly screamed and sobbed, her face swollen with tears, and to all further questions addressed to her, she only shook her head stubbornly and sobbed. Lisa, my friend. The girl is hysterical, indifferently stated the operatives. You see, she was taken to the medics. The ambulance arrived, loaded Lisa into the car with all possible precautions, and drove off with a shrill screech, leaving the paramedic in the village. Taya, take care of the shockers. The doctor commanded the woman and jumped into the departing car. We'll send the locals for you as soon as they get here. The paramedic covered Molly with a blanket, gave her a sedative injection, and told John to give her tea. Do you have any valerian, chamomile, peppermint? I don't. In despair broke his hands. I don't know. There's something in the locker over there. He didn't even have to pretend panic and horror. He was already in that state, only not from the fact of what had happened, but from the fact that his wife was still breathing when the ambulance arrived. Is she gonna be okay? Do you think she'll be all right? Every now and then, he asked the paramedic, concentrating on the jars in the kitchen cupboard. I'm not a doctor. She fought back at first, but her inconsolable husband wouldn't let up, so she had to come clean. You must brace yourself and prepare for the worst, young man. I've seen a lot. The injuries are too serious. For sure, if Lisa had fallen into the hands of another surgeon, it would have been all over for her, but for her luck, or maybe for her misfortune, it was myself who was on duty at the trauma center that day. A month after the described events, there was some improvement in her condition. Instruments showed that the nerves in her spine were responding to the irritation. But why can't she move her legs? John asked the attending physician with a dejected face. You see, he replied, with this kind of trauma, the internal connections in the body are disturbed. How to put it simply? The brain does not react sufficiently to the fact that the spine can function again. There's like this natural blockage. You need long rehabilitation, special exercises. A special specialist deals with such patients. We recommend you after discharge. You don't have to worry. Finally, the investigator broke through to Lisa and, putting on a white coat, entered the room. Good afternoon. I'm the investigator in your case. You must tell me everything you remember about the day of the accident. I don't remember much. Lisa's eyes filled with pain and tears. It was so terrible, so swift. Yes, I understand, the investigator said softly. But still you must try. What did the man who was driving the motorboat look like? Like a big frog, said Lisa. A big and bug-eyed frog. No, not even a toad, you know? Not really. The investigator shook his head. Try to describe your impressions in more detail. There was something wrong with his eyes, Lisa said with effort. And the hands, they were some. Like what? The investigator stepped forward. Slippery. Suddenly, Lisa realized what she was feeling. His hands were slippery, sticky. How can you say that if you haven't touched his hands? The man clarified. I don't know. Lisa shook her head. It just seemed that way. All right. The investigator sighed tiredly. Let's write it down in the protocol. Sign here, please. You see, it's written down for my words and so on. None of the testimonies of the uninjured, not those given by eyewitnesses, did not help the investigation because the criminal who drove the motorboat had long ago crossed the border of the country, leaving immediately after his pernicious deed, in a car with a buddy waiting for him in a nearby grove. Molly found this man moonlighting at neighboring dachas in another settlement, not in the academic one, and promising big money for him. Explained what had to be done. A rusty motorboat, they had long looked out for at an old boat shed, and one day under the cover of night, these two accomplices brought a working engine, bought at a flea market, unknown from whom, no receipt, no possibility of finding out, did not leave clever Molly to the investigation, and then took her out and sneaked her to the pond, where they hid, disguised by a stretched awning and a pile of branches. Such a sight was not new to dacha dwellers. Every now and then someone sawed and cut old fruit trees, throwing discarded branches as they pleased. It's disgraceful, they've dragged a pile of cuttings again. The dacha dwellers were squeamishly wrinkling their nose, bypassing the obstacles. That was the end of it. Apparently, Lisa turned out to be much stronger than everyone thought. She was getting better every day, but only with one half of her body. The lower half was still not obeying her. One afternoon, she was approached by a fit, muscular man with nice brown eyes. Lisa, good afternoon. Hello. Lisa was surprised. I don't believe we've met before. He wasn't wearing a medical uniform, just light sports clothes, so she didn't understand why some stranger had come and was calling her by name. So we've met. The guest smiled. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm your physical therapist and exercise coach, William, he added. Nice to meet you. Lisa sighed with relief. Did I think that one of the visitors had gotten the wrong room? No, William laughed. I'm attached to you now. He looked at Lisa affectionately and kindly. I apologize for what I'm about to do, but you'll have to bear with my interference. Ready? Yes. Lisa nodded apprehensively. I guess so. Then let's begin. He gently felt her whole body with his strong and warm fingers, starting, oddly enough, with her head. He massaged her temples, the back of her head, her collarbones, turned her hands back and forth, wrote something down on the clipboard he'd brought, frowned. Then he said something incomprehensible to Lisa. Let's you and I try to move our tongues. Watch like this, I'll show you. And as a result, for 15 minutes, they made different faces, opened and closed their mouths, and made all sorts of sounds. What's all this for? Asked the tired Lisa in the end. Everything in our body is connected. William answered her. It seems to you that the tongue and the locomotor system have nothing to do with each other. But in fact, this is completely wrong. When we exercise with our tongue, it has a very effective effect on our pelvic floor, and our legs are attached to it. Do you see the connection? Sort of. Lisa nodded. But, I'm just so tired. It's just as it should be. The doctor smiled, because now all your muscles have been working together. But I'm going to look at your lower extremities now, and you relax, okay? If you feel anything, Tell me immediately. Don't be shy. Anything, even the faintest sensation." Lisa closed her eyes and prepared to feel the sensations. Minutes passed, but nothing happened, so it seemed to her. But here was something like a slight warmth or tingling. She couldn't make it out and said as she opened her eyes, "I think I felt something just now." "When exactly?" William raised his head. "Just now." He moved his hand down to his toes, and Lisa nodded affirmatively. "Yes, I think so." "Good." The satisfied doctor covered her legs with the blanket again and straightened up. "Well, see you tomorrow, Lisa. I'll see you at the same time tomorrow." From that first day, she waited for these appointments as she used to wait for her evening injections. These injections had been canceled long ago, and at first she was very painful, feeling a terrible desire to experience again that wonderful feeling of envelopment and lightness, and then complete indifference to everything, which came after the injection, but the doctor said everything. It was no longer possible. For a week and a half Lisa was in a disgustingly irritated state in the evenings, but there was nothing she could do about it. She had to get used to the fact that she would no longer get the shots she wanted. Now classes were the new soothing for her. When he came into the room with him, joy, hope entered. When he withdrew, clouds covered the sky, and at home in the academic cottage, Molly and John held a council of war. By this time they had been dragged through the offices of the investigation department, and with each visit they grew more anxious. No more waiting. Molly persuaded her lover. "We can't wait any longer." "But how? How do we do it?" He fought back. "There are a lot of people there, doctors, nurses. We need to wait until we take home." "That's your indecision." Molly was angry. "What? What's my indecision?" John jumped up and down. "Do you think I'm the reason she wasn't killed by a screw?" "What does that have to do with me?" "You should have steered the boat sharper." Molly yelled. "Sharper, you know? You should have steered it yourself." John snapped at her and went to the veranda to smoke, but she wouldn't leave him alone. "Oh, so that's it. Not only that I planned and organized everything, not only that I came up with the perfect scenario, found performers, and calculated everything down to the last detail. And you, what did you do, I ask you? Who took the credit? I couldn't stand John. The money for everything for this event, who got it, huh? Or do you think it came out of thin air? You should have acted more quickly. I'd have paid back my loan by now." Molly parried, but softened a little at this reminder. "Let's not, asked the softer John. "So it's already over the top. Can we at least stop squabbling among ourselves?" He admired Molly, admired her determination, perseverance, willpower. He was crazy about her beautifully trained body and what she did with it, too. Lisa had never been able to do that and didn't want to. He'd married her for money, having met her by chance at her art academy, where he'd come to fix the wiring. John was a good electrician. He knew and loved his work, had the highest tolerance, and with closed eyes could tell zero from ground. Professional terms for the voltage present in a cable. Delicate and beautiful as a fragile spring flower, the girl attracted him by her defenselessness, her trustworthiness, her unlike all the other women he usually dealt with. When it turned out that she was also the daughter of a famous academician who had a lot of material wealth, which John so aspired to, he added momentum, and soon they had already set the date of the wedding. Lisa's mother has long since left her relatives, settled down in the central city cemetery, and could not tell her daughter that such hasty and unequal marriages are very rarely successful, and the choice of the future husband is a little strange. But what could be in common with her, raised by caring parents with love, intelligent to the marrow of his bones, received the best education, passionate about painting, a young girl and a working electrician who finished 9 grades in the school, and the father was already too ill to be well-oriented in what was happening. Perhaps it was this circumstance that pushed Lisa into the arms of the handsome electrician. She was insanely afraid of being alone. "What do you think of him?" Shy and blushing, she asked her faithful friend Molly. She squinted her eyes and winked. "Everything seems to be in order. Did you check the working machine?" "What machine?" Lisa didn't understand, and having understood, with the help of her friend, the essence of the joke, she blushed thickly. "Come on, Molly. Don't joke like that, please. I'd forgotten that you're a fairy princess." Molly teased her chaste friend, saving herself for the one and only. "Don't, Molly," Lisa confused. "Why would you do that?" All right. Molly threw up her hands in a conciliatory manner. "All right, I'm out. I made a bad joke. I'm sorry, I'm a fool. You're not stupid at all." Good Lisa gently stroked her friend's arm. "You just have a different upbringing. You know, I wish I could be like you, as brave, as independent." Lisa sighed. "But you can't. I am who I am, and so are you, and it's not our fault. It's not our fault." Molly agreed lightheartedly. "Come on, enough of this." At the very end of September, Lisa was finally discharged home. Now she moved around the house in a wheelchair, accompanied everywhere by a nurse, and was a terrible burden to John and Molly. William came to see her 3 times a week for remedial exercise, and the rest of the time, if she was awake, she sat on the big glass veranda, sketching or working on endless still lifes and landscapes. "Now it's time," said Molly, one evening. "And don't mind any more. I've already made an appointment for Wednesday. Don't worry, it'll be fine." Seeing how John's face changed, she put her warm and strong palm on one knee. "Just a little more and we'll be free." "Are you sure?" He looked at her, concerned. "Quite sure." Tomorrow they left to get passports and returned in high spirits, with beer, lavender tea for Lisa, and a large cake. "Baby," John called out as he entered the veranda. "We're back. The cake's here. Let's go and have tea." "Okay," she smiled at him. Now, the executive nurse helped her gather her brushes and paints, and after rolling her to the dining room, she left to wash the collected art supplies. Molly, smiling like a fox, showed Lisa a large packet of pills. "Look what I bought. A friend recommended it. She says it helps you sleep well and relieves anxiety. Shall we try it? You're my good, caring friend." Lisa was touched. It did not occur to her to doubt the good intentions of her dear friend. "Of course we'll try it, because everything is dreaming different things. My head is cracking as I close my eyes. My heart is fluttering, as if it is about to jump out. And the ones the neurologist prescribed are not helping. You'll tell me later how the effect is." Molly handed her a glass of water and a large oval pill. "Swallow it carefully." Lisa woke up the next morning as good as new. She had no headache, and a pleasant alertness in all her muscles. What a great drug! Excitedly, she said to Molly and John at breakfast, "I had such a good night's sleep." "There you go." Molly rejoiced. "My friend's doctor told me to take it 3 times a day. It makes you drowsy and doesn't cause drowsiness." "That's great. That's just great." Did not get tired of praising Lisa. Approved medicines. "By the way, Lisa," said Molly, taking a bite out of her sandwich, "we wanted to talk to you about something. There's a lot of things to do while you were in the hospital. Utilities, the electric meter needs to be changed in the city, to register your disability temporarily, to extend your vacation at work, to open a special account for Social Security, to transfer benefits, and other stuff. It's very inconvenient and pathetic to drive you every time. Yes, Lisa frowned. What to do? I found out. Excitedly, Molly continued, that you can get a special power of attorney from a notary with all the rights so that everything can be done without you. Expensive, of course, but no matter what the issue at any time, you do not need to bother. Can you imagine how convenient? Great, Lisa nodded. Sure, let's do it. But there's probably a queue. We'll have to agree on a specific time. I've already agreed. Molly winked. There won't be any lines. The notary will come right here to us, a little more expensive, but not to pull you. How clever you are, Molly. Lisa looked at her friend with genuine admiration. I would never have thought of it myself. We'll do it for you, right? Uh-huh. Molly smiled proudly. I am. Just don't do it on me. We're legal strangers to you. She waved her hands in frustration. They'll charge a lot of money. You'll sign for John. It's cheaper for the spouses. Hurriedly and minute by minute, looking at her watch, the lady notary arrived half an hour late. They were getting nervous that she wouldn't arrive at all. But they explained it to you, didn't they? Transactions today, it takes a lot of time. It is impossible to calculate to the minute. She snapped at them. Where's the patient? This way, please. Molly went to the veranda. Lisa, the notary, is here. Sitting without her easel for the occasion, Lisa turned around. Hello, hello, said the lady, pulling papers out of her briefcase. What's your name? Lisa. Why? Name and surname, your patronymic and your year of birth, as it is supposed to be. The lady replied irritably, not looking at Lisa, and writing something in a thick, huge book. Oh, I see. Elizaveta Vishnevskaya. After a minute, having torn herself away from the notes, she said, Familiarize yourself with the text of the power of attorney. Oh, so much. Lisa was amazed. Do I have to read it all? As you wish, the notary said dryly. I inform you that the power of attorney with the right to manage and dispose of all your property is issued in the name of your spouse, John. Year of birth, passport data, registration is made on a special form, recorded in the electronic registry. If you want to cancel, she kept saying something, in Lisa's head. Every word was a mess. The lines danced in front of her eyes and merged into colored, ugly spots. Do you understand? The notary's last question brought her out of her stupor. Yes, she nodded, wishing only one thing, that this unpleasant stranger would leave their house as soon as possible. Everything is clear. Where do I sign? Here. Brief signature and full name, surname, first name, middle name. Okay, now the same here. Okay, now it's in the register. How many can I do? Lisa thought to herself, carefully writing out line by line in her handwriting. That's it? That's it. The notary noisily slammed the register shut. All the best to you, and to you, mechanically repeated Lisa, and leaned back with relief on the cushion lying in the stroller. In a couple days, John, said Lisa. Lisa, you will need to go into town for a while. Molly's to nurse with you, of course, and I have to stay here. What's the matter? Lisa got worried. The heating system has to be repaired. The boiler's going out. You will all freeze here when we turn off the heating, but it must be done. Otherwise, the house will freeze in winter if the boiler breaks down. What a horror! Lisa sighed convulsively. More misfortunes. What kind of trouble is that little one? John smiled affectionately at his wife. It's nothing. It's just going to take some time. And away they went. Gray and boring city days stretched on. There was no spaciousness and air of the dacha. There was no big and bright, glassed-in veranda. And Molly became irritable and always angry, always going somewhere, going away, answering the phone every now and then, trying to go out almost in the entrance, so that Lisa could not hear what she was talking about. "Molly, what's wrong?" Lisa asked her friend, but she just mumbled something vague and waved her off. "Later, Lisa, later. I told you I have a lot of things to do. I'll clear everything up, and we'll go with you to the cottage again. How's the heating, dear?" Lisa asked her husband on the phone. "How much longer?" "Almost finished," he reported. "I've also done a little electrical work while I'm still at work in the fall. Anyway, a couple more weeks and you'll be back." Lisa was anxious, worried, and probably wouldn't have slept well if it hadn't been for the wonderful pills. When she took them, she was much less worried about everything that was going on. Now she had to take 2 pills at once, but that was nothing. The main thing was that it helped. And only the grown-up motley Trishka, Lisa's favorite fluffy ball, jumping all day, pleased her weary heart, and William, who came as carefully as to the cottage to study. "You must try harder," said he, "Lisa. They had long ago switched to you for convenience, and you've been slacking off lately. You've become sluggish and relaxed. What's the matter?" "Yes, I'm very worried," Lisa complained to him. "Molly's having problems at the cottage. She's busy with her chores. Let's concentrate and work," William urged. "Do you want to get back on your feet by spring or what?" "I do. Of course I do." Lisa smiled. "I'll do my best." At last the repairs were finished, and she was taken back to the cottage. Lisa didn't notice any special changes, and there shouldn't have been any. The repairs were mainly in the basement, changing pipes, something else, John explained, but she didn't really care about the details. The main thing was that now her favorite veranda was at her disposal again. One night at dinner, Molly said, as if by accident, "Lisa, I'm going to have to go away for a while, because we have some important meetings. I've missed a lot already, you know." Sure. What are you talking about?" Lisa nodded. "Go, of course. Let John take you to the train or whatever it is you're going to do." "That's the point," said Molly. "Exactly how do you get there?" "All of ours had already left, and I decided at the last minute. It was a shame to leave you alone in the city like that, you know. That's why I can't get the tickets I need. Airplane tickets are too expensive, and the train tickets are all sold out. Would you mind if John gave me a ride to New York in his car? And from there are good tickets. I checked." "Of course. What are you talking about?" Lisa exclaimed. "Who would I be if I objected? You both care about me so much, of course you'll go. Then we'll say goodbye." Molly smiled. "We have to leave early tomorrow to make it on time. We'll leave at 4 o'clock in the morning, right, John?" "Sort of," agreed John. "And you, honey, sleep, don't worry. And don't forget to take your pills. They're good for you." The day when Lisa was left all alone, apart from the nurse and the kitten, was unusually nice and sunny. It was like an unplanned holiday in the middle of November. Lisa asked the nurse to take her out into the garden, sat in the sunshine, and breathed the fresh air. Then had breakfast at 11 o'clock as usual and went to the veranda to work while there was good light. And about an hour later, heard the noise of the automatic gate pulling away, surprised and alarmed. Had John and Molly really returned? Maybe they had forgotten something important, say, a passport, and would now be late for the train. But a completely unfamiliar car drove into the yard. Out of it came strangers, a woman and a man, and with them a small child. As if they were at home, they went to the front door of the house and opened it with a key. "Emily, Emily," shouted Lisa to the nurse. "Emily, come here, for God's sake. Some strangers have come to our yard. Go ask them what they want." Emily left, and Lisa sat alone on the veranda again, listening to some lively dialogue between her and the strangers. She could hardly make out the words from the veranda, and here came the disturbed Emily, and with her the man who had come in the big unfamiliar car. "Good afternoon. Weren't you supposed to leave before today as agreed?" "What do you mean?" "I don't understand, Lisa. What was the agreement?" "With whom? With the salesman, of course." The man chuckled. "We bought the house." "You bought the house?" Lisa's eyes darkened. "No, it can't be. This is some kind of terrible mistake. This is my house. I live here. I've lived here for a long time. The cottage belonged to my late father, then to me. But you sold it to us, didn't you?" The man pulled some yellow paper out of his bag. "Look at this. Your husband signed the contract for you with a power of attorney." "Read it, read it. You gave him the power of attorney." "I did." Lisa echoed. But I didn't think, I didn't know." "Listen to me. I had absolutely no intention of selling the cottage." She shrieked, finally realizing what was happening. John must have been deceived, missiled. Wait, I'll call him now." She pulled out her phone and pressed the call button. There was no dial tone for a long time, and then the cell phone operator announced, in the voice of a mindless mechanical robot, that the subscriber was not answering or temporarily unavailable. Not picking up the phone, probably communications out of the way. "They left this morning, John and Molly. You know Molly has a plane out of New York today," she said to the man who was standing beside her, looking around, looking bossy. "Mason, what's going on here?" His wife came in and also looked at Lisa with surprise. "And who are you exactly?" "I am the owner of this cottage," Lisa told her rather uncertainly. "You were sold it by mistake." "By mistake?" The woman became agitated. "By mistake, you say?" "Yes, I'll call the police." "What kind of mistake?" "This isn't a joke, my dear. Here's the deed, here's the register. This is our house now, so I'm gonna have to ask you to leave." "Leave?" Lisa was indignant. "Where do you expect me to go?" "What do we care?" The woman smirked. "It's not our concern anymore." Shaking with terror, Lisa dialed Molly and John again and again, but could not reach them. Then, in utter despair, she called William. "Hello, William. It's Lisa. Yes. You know, I've had a terrible situation. Some strangers came and said I'd sold them the cottage, but I hadn't. John signed the contract by power of attorney. Someone must have cheated him. Probably the same people who came are kicking me out. Where am I going to go? Who will carry me to the cab, to the apartment? I don't even know who to turn to anymore. Could you come and take me to town? Please, I'll pay." William assured her that he would be there soon, and asked her not to worry, and to tell the strangers that he would come and take her away within the hour. Another conversation. Nodded the newfound hosts. "Wait, of course. What are we, some kind of fiends?" And they left the veranda and started to carry bags and boxes from the car. Lisa sat in her wheelchair, swallowing tears and convulsively clutching her pale, skinny hands, breaking, crunching her fingers. "Emily, please," she asked the nurse. "Would you be so kind as to fetch me my pills?" "Yes, I know it's not evening yet, but I'm terribly worried, Emily. Bring them, please." After taking the pills, Lisa was able to breathe more freely. The pressure in her chest was gone, and her eyes no longer swam in dark circles. Her head cleared, her eyes grew heavy, and she practically fell asleep sitting in the chair. It seemed like only 5 minutes had passed and William had already arrived. "What's going on here?" he asked worriedly. "Come on, put your arms around my neck. I'll carry you to the car. Don't forget Trishka." Lisa got worried. He mustn't stay here alone. Trish is loaded too. And Emily the nurse, who in the meantime had managed to collect some things Lisa needed and left for the city. At the apartment they got another unpleasant surprise. Lisa's keys did not fit the lock, which was shining with a new keyhole on the door, familiar from childhood. "What is it?" "I don't understand anything." Lisa cried out in despair. "What is it?" "Why can't I enter my own apartment?" "Calm down." William pressed the bell button. "We'll take care of it. What do you want?" An elderly woman, a complete stranger to Lisa, opened the door on a chain. "Who are you here to see?" "I live here." Lisa shouted and tried to reach forward in her wheelchair and grab the door with her hand, but William intercepted her just in time and put his foot through the gap. "Listen," he said to the woman who opened the door. "This girl lives here. She's the landlady." "What kind of nonsense is that?" The woman was indignant. "My son bought this apartment a week ago. They are on vacation now and left me with my grandson. Go away before the child wakes up, or I'll call the police." Tears of despair and terror covered Lisa's eyes as William carried her downstairs to the car again. Setting her in the chair, he went back into the driveway to get the stroller, and Lisa tried calling her husband again. To no avail. "This is a nightmare, a dream." She complained to the returning William. "I have no idea what to do now. Shall we go to my place?" The doctor told her. "You'll stay with us for a few days. Get to know my family. We'll figure something out." He did not tell her so immediately that, most likely, her husband and best friend mercilessly threw her, selling both the house and the apartment, and themselves swept away to other, more distant lands. Of course, that's what happened. At the hour Lisa discovered that she no longer owned her entire place, they were already on a plane, and the plane was approaching the coast of the warm ocean. They didn't go as far as New York City. The car, which had also been sold, was handed over to the new owner near the airport, and they flew light with a substantial sum of money, transferred a couple days before to Molly and John from Lisa's account, to a hot tropical country. They expected that no one would find them there, and they had no intention of going back. They had already prepared residence permits for them and rented a nice villa on the coast in the name of a front man. "We'll sit for a while until everything settles down, and then we'll go to the islands. It's quieter there." Molly was talking John, happy that she finally got rid of her precious friend and everything that had surrounded her for years, annoying her and not giving her a normal life. Now she had settled down well, even perfectly, and was going to enjoy the well-being she deserved. And Lisa was inconsolable. In William's apartment, she sat in her stroller motionless, with her eyes red from tears, and stared, without seeing what she was looking at one point. A thought was beating insistently in her brain, but Lisa would not let it go. An inner voice told her that she didn't need to think about it, or it would hurt too much. By evening she was revitalized, remembering her pills, because the intrusive thought was becoming unbearably nagging, and was about to threaten to break through to some catastrophic conclusion. "William," Lisa called out in a weak voice. A boy of about 12 came into the room. "Do you want your daddy?" "I'll get him right away." He disappeared. 2 minutes later, the caller himself came up. "How are you, Lisa?" "I'm fine." "I need my pills in my bag. How long have you been taking those?" In the voice of William, who took out the package, you could hear notes of anxiety and even anger. "Who prescribed them to you?" "Some doctor Molly knows." Lisa shrugged. "She brought them over and said they were good for anxiety and worry. You know, I haven't been sleeping very well since the event, very badly, and I've been worrying. I was just panicking, and when I started taking them, everything went away. At first I drank one at night, and now again. So much has happened, I have to take 2 or 3 a day, but it's okay. Molly brought me a lot, a whole box. Molly brought you? Repeated William in a murderous tone, and shook his head back and forth, making a face as if he recognized something terrible. Without a word he left the room. And the pills? Lisa cried out. You forgot to give me the pills. William appeared in the doorway again. Forget about them, you hear me? It's a drug, and you're already addicted to it. What? What drug? What are you talking about? They're just sedatives. Lisa spoke loudly and excitedly, hurrying, making excuses again, but he didn't listen to her anymore. He started to call somewhere, to find out something, to talk to someone. Give me my pills, give me my pills. Please, please, I'm in so much pain. It's so bad without them. Shouted Lisa, driving up to the door, jerked the handle, it was locked. You too. You too. She started banging her head against the door in hysterics. You're all conspiring to ruin me, and you're in on it with them. I realize now, I realize very well how much I hate you all. I hate you all. She screamed and shrieked with rage. Do not think me so defenseless and stupid. No, no. In a wild impulse, she leaned her hands on the rail of the stroller, pulled herself up, and stood. Yes, she stood on her own, unaided, driven only by her raging, overwhelming fury. It was the thought that had kept her awake for so long, faded in the narcotic fog, unable to take shape. Now that the effects of the drug had worn off, Lisa realized everything, but with all her soul, with all her being, she insistently sought only one thing, the pills that would give her oblivion and peace. After standing for a few seconds and looking at her skinny, pale legs with blue veins, she suddenly shrieked like a wounded wild bird and collapsed on the floor near the stroller. Lisa. The door opened, colliding against the stroller, and William burst into the room. Jesus, Lisa, are you up? He shook her and laughed and cried himself. You got up, you made it. Grabbing her in a senseless armful, he carried her to the bed, laid her there, covered her with a blanket, and shouted to his son, Ethan, open the door, the doctor's coming. William himself remained seated beside Lisa, guarding against unfaithful, painful sleep. An hour later, she was back in the clinic, but not the one she had been in months ago. It was a specialized addiction clinic where she was to spend many difficult weeks. The luxurious villa was immersed in tropical greenery. The open balustrade overlooked the ocean bay, and everything breathed peace. By the pool with impeccably clear azure water lay, covering her face with a summer lace hat, a woman in a white swimsuit with an impeccable athletic figure, tanned to an even golden bronze color. Apparently, the peaceful splash of the waves coming from the coast, the fresh breeze giving coolness at this very hot lunch hour, and the slender cries of a bird lulled her to sleep. Noiselessly, treading in soft slippers, a Vietnamese maid came by, took away an empty martini bottle and 2 dirty cocktail glasses, and all was quiet again. But then some voices were heard from the side of the balustrade, then footsteps, and someone said protesting, What right have you to trespass on private property like this? Someone answered the voice in a foreign tongue. Another voice, a high, hurried voice, like the muttering of a bird, and the sharp footsteps came nearer, still nearer. Molly called someone very close to the sleeping woman, and again, Molly, wake up. What is it? Awkwardly removed her hat from Molly's face and looked at those who approached with cloudy, disgruntled, sleep-deprived eyes. What's going on here? Who are all these people, John? Madam Molly?" A man speaking the same language as the woman came forward. "You must come with us." "Why would I do that?" Molly was indignant, yawning. "Call the police, John." "Who let them in here? Those crazy assholes?" "Oh, yes, let me introduce myself." The English-speaking man took off his small-holed summer hat. "Interpol Central Bureau, Officer Braun. These are our witnesses." He nodded toward the crowded, wary Vietnamese and turned to John. "All this applies to you too, Mr. John." "No, no, no," Molly shouted, jumping up from the chaise lounge. "You have no right. This is some kind of wild mistake. We're decent people. What are we accused of?" "You are right," nodded the officer. "Quite right. I got a little distracted looking at your beautiful villa, and I completely forgot to list the acts of which you are accused." So he began to curl the fingers on his hand. Attempted murder, committed by an organized group of persons, by prior conspiracy with particular cruelty, fraud, deliberate inducement of a person to abuse drugs, and a little thing, forgery of documents. "I think we're good." He smiled. "So please get dressed and follow me, voluntarily and without any tricks. The villa is cordoned off, you understand." He spread his hands. "And any resistance to the lawful demands of the law enforcement agencies that my humble person here represents is completely futile." Molly and John looked at each other poisonously. Molly pulled herself together and nodded her head slightly. "All right, give us a few minutes." "Of course." The officer waved his hand broadly. "My men will escort you to the check room or wherever you want to go." On the other side of Molly, in a city far away from these magical coasts, about 2 months after the last events described above, 3 people of tall, athletic build, a man with brown eyes, another with an attentive, serious face, and in a strict suit with a briefcase, and a frail, slender young woman approached the gates of the prison, showed their passports at the checkpoint. The man in the suit said something to the officer on duty, and they were let through the gate. "How are you?" asked the brown-eyed man. "Are you sure you're ready?" "Yeah," she nodded. "I'm fine. I'm fine." Passing through a maze of corridors, some posts and barred doors, they found themselves in a small office, where behind a simple shabby desk sat a man in a gray suit, with such cold and hard eyes that anyone would feel uncomfortable when looking at him. The man who came with the diplomat, however, was not confused. "Good afternoon, Christopher. We're all here as agreed." "Good." The man in the gray suit, almost without looking at them, handed over the papers. "Show the witnesses where to sign." When the formalities were over, 2 more people were brought into the office, a woman and a man in handcuffs, both short-shaven, eyes lost. The escort who had brought them in saluted and stood at the doorway. "You have 3 minutes to communicate freely." Through the man in gray, towards everyone gathered. "Then we'll begin the confrontation." A man with warm brown eyes shook the hand of a fragile blonde woman, and she swallowed convulsively, finally daring to raise her eyes to those who were brought in handcuffs. "John, Molly," her voice trembled. "Why are you doing this to me?" Molly laughed deliberately, rudely, and insolently. "Did you think, my dear, that I would be your free servant all my life? That everything would always be handed to you on a platter, and the whole world would love you forever, like Daddy and Mommy? Ah, I hate you and people like you." She spat vigorously in the direction of the fragile woman standing with widened eyes of horror, but got on the edge of the table of a gray, steel-eyed man. He shifted his heavy gaze to her, and she fell silent, and her angry rage faded. "So I see that we can begin the interrogation," the man in the gray suit stated, took out a paper napkin, squeamishly wiped away the spit, and threw it in the trash. Then he opened a thick cardboard folder on his desk and turned to those who had come in. "If you would be so kind as to state your last names, first names, middle names." 3.5 weeks after this first meeting in the pre-trial detention center, Molly, accused of all the crimes mentioned by the Interpol officer, hanged herself in her cell, using her apron tights for this purpose. Her accomplice, Lisa's ex-husband, completely withdrew into himself and obediently bore everything that fate had deservedly sentenced him to. At the trial, he repented of everything, admitted his guilt, tearfully asked Lisa for forgiveness, swore that he realized everything, and on all made a disgusting impression, a helpless and broken man. He was given the maximum as requested by the prosecutor, and a few years later he died quietly in some penal colony of tuberculosis, complicated by pneumonia. Lisa became very close to William and his son, as well as their elderly grandmother. The family had lost their mother a couple of years earlier, and Lisa, who long after the experience was over could not trust anyone, did not immediately reciprocate William's advances. "You must be a very good man," she said to him sadly. "That is, you seem good to me, but I am not able now to realize who is who and trust you. I'm not worthy of you. I'm not even worthy of myself. Yeah, don't mind me. I'm just an idiot who can't see what's going on under her nose, and I'm a complete stranger to people." "That's okay." He comforted her. "You're the most courageous and resilient person I know." "Yes, I am," she grinned. "Come on, it was all your own idea." It took 3 whole years to rehabilitate Lisa, and all that time William was there, always ready to help. And one late summer evening, sitting on the veranda of her returned cottage and pensively looking at the lantern on which the silly, burning from their relentless and impossible striving moths were beating, she quietly said, sitting next to William, "You know I'll never marry again, and I'll never have children. You know that, don't you?" Lisa grinned bitterly. "So what?" he asked, smiling, and took her hand gently. "I don't need a stamp in my passport, and I have a son too. Then why do you need me?" Lisa raised her suffering, sad eyes to him, but suddenly he saw something new in them. "Why?" she repeated insistently. "To love you." He answered gently, "Just to love, that's all." "Is that enough?" Her lips trembled and tears came into her eyes. "It is enough for me." He slowly moved closer to her, so as not to frighten her or scare her away. "I love you, Lisa. I just love you. That's enough for me. Even if I can't love you the same way. We won't measure the quantity of our love." He finally put his arms around her and pulled her close to him. "I'm sure it's enough for us as a whole." "William," Lisa cried, "I don't deserve this." That's it. Stop worrying. I'm not going anywhere else, do you hear me?" He told her firmly. "You won't send me away again." Lisa, true to her word, never married him, both of them quite happy with it. To this day, the two live together in an old academic summer house. Lisa paints after the trauma of the unanimous assessment of critics. In her paintings appeared something new, attractive. Depth, mystery, unspoken pain. They are eagerly bought by wealthy people and connoisseurs of contemporary art, and several times a year, Lisa has solo exhibitions in various cities around the world. William continues to work with her broken patients, trying to find his approach to each one. And he tells everyone an incredible, almost impossible story of healing of one small and fragile, but so strong and pure in spirit woman that before her fate itself retreated, first preparing for her a completely different, very tragic and cruel ending.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Betty was embroidering a painting. It came out quite beautifully. A warm summer landscape, a quiet lake, birch trees, green grass, all illustrating the real nature. The woman looked out the window, and there was exactly the same picture. That is why Betty decided to embroider this particular picture. This hobby appeared at her long ago, since her own daughter left for the city. The woman herself was already in her 70s, and she lived alone in her native house in the village of Dawn. Here all summer shone gentle sunshine, and under the autumn made the ground colorful leaves of maples. Everything was pleasing to the eye, only it was boring for the woman to live alone. Earlier at least there were neighbors, but now someone had already died, someone's children were taken away to the city, and someone's grandchildren came only in the summer to sunbathe in the sun. And it wasn't that there was nothing to do. The whole house was shining with cleanliness. There was food for a week, and the orchard had apples in time. Betty missed her daughter Kate terribly. She had moved out God knows how many years ago and had gone to college. She finished her studies in the city and started her own life. At first she tried to visit her mother almost every week. Then these periods were reduced to a month, to a year. And then the daughter stopped visiting her mother altogether. She had her own children, her own life. Betty knew almost nothing about her, and she had seen her grandchildren only a few times in her whole life. How were they doing? Were they sick? Do they need help? These were the questions Betty asked herself every time she went to bed. But there was no word from Kate. It was July again. Summer was in full swing, and many of the neighbors and their children were here on vacation. Who wouldn't come to the countryside in this weather? The lake is right outside the window. Kate was the only one who didn't take her children here. Betty invited her daughter and granddaughter many times, but they refused because they had a lot to do, or they were on vacation elsewhere. The eldest grandson had been to the cottage only once, when he was 2 years old. Betty has not seen him once since then. And Maria, the youngest, not even once. She's 1 year old now. What do they do? What are their personalities? These questions remain unanswered. But Betty, don't despair. During the summer, she had someone to talk to from the younger generation. A wonderful family with a child lived next door. Thomas was only 6 years old, and often Betty was invited into their home as a babysitter. The parents would leave with happy faces to spend time together, and the woman would be left alone with this beautiful boy. He really was a wonderful, intelligent child. For his age, he knew a lot, even more than he needed to. He could count to 10 and read. And when his parents stayed up late, Betty would tell him stories to help him fall asleep. Thomas loved Betty very much. She replaced his grandmother, who, unfortunately, he didn't get to see in his lifetime. But Betty fulfilled that role perfectly. Grandma Betty, do you have a daughter or a son? Thomas asked this painful question one evening when his parents were once again late. He and the woman were having tea on the veranda. There was a dim light, a floor lamp, and the full moon was shining down on them. A firefly could be spotted on the grass. Thomas often chased after them, trying to collect them in a jar, but all attempts were unsuccessful, and the boy gave up. Betty looked out the window and wondered. The boy had made her question again. Did she really have a daughter? They haven't communicated normally in about 10 years. Could she be considered a daughter in that case? Of course she is. The woman replied calmly, smiling as she rocked back in her chair and looked up at the moon. Her legs were completely shrouded in plaid, the loudness of crickets rolling on them. Who? Thomas wouldn't stop. A daughter. Her name is Kate. She's a very nice woman. How come I've never seen her? She doesn't come here. Why doesn't she? I don't know why. If she did, she'd give you an answer. Probably me. She's just not interested in how mom can be. Not interested. You're very young, Thomas, but you ask very smart questions. You know, sometimes parents and their kids don't understand each other. It's like they're living on different planets, that's why. Kids drift away from their parents because they have a completely different idea of life. I don't understand you. The boy confessed and took a look. He seemed very upset. I don't understand myself sometimes, Thomas, but know that you are a very clever boy, and someday you will remember my words. I will never leave my mother, the boy said firmly and with a touch of resentment. And rightly so. Your mom is the most valuable thing in life. She brought you into this life, educates you, and gives you everything she can. Grandma Betty. Thomas started and got a little embarrassed. I'll never leave you either. Do you want me to be your child and always be there for you? The woman laughed and the boy threw himself into her arms. Betty saw a tear folding down Thomas's cheek. You're the best, son. The woman cheered him up. The boy smiled back and then laughed. Half an hour later, his parents came home. They thanked the woman for her services and invited her to tea, but she said it was past her bedtime. It was almost 11 o'clock in the evening, and even in summer it was better to keep some kind of sleep schedule. Betty returned home and immediately went to bed. She was very tired, for she had been with Thomas from this morning until late this afternoon. They had gone to the lake, then they had played in the garden, and after they were tired they had tea. The woman was very fond of such busy days. They gave her a taste of life. She felt young again, although 70 was no longer such an active age. Thomas stimulated in her a desire to live. She could devote the rest of her life to raising this little boy. The next day, the woman sat with the child as usual. His mother was cooking dinner, and his father had gone fishing. Once again, they asked for Betty's help. However, this was no longer a whim of the parents. Thomas was really asking to spend time with her. Thomas, you again. The woman exclaimed excitedly, approaching the boy and wrapping her arms around him. Me, Grandma, Betty, let's go to the vegetable garden. Mommy said it's full of strawberries. Laughed the boy with joy. I have strawberries growing too. Then we'll pick some at my place too. And I'll make jam later. You will come to me in winter, and we will enjoy this wonderful deliciousness. For about 20 minutes, they picked strawberries in Thomas's yard. And when the last berry was put in the basket, Betty offered to move to her plot. Of course, it was smaller, but the strawberry bushes took up most of the garden. The woman often made jam from the berries. She had cherry, raspberries, and gooseberries. Suddenly, Betty noticed that Thomas kept looking back. It looked suspicious. What did you see there, Thomas? The woman asked, picking berries. I saw some people walking around your house. What if they are bandits? The boy answered in a frightened voice and looked back again. Betty was also intrigued and frightened. She stood up quietly and slowly began to walk over to where the people were crowded. Her eyesight was poor, so she just saw the outline of a woman with a baby in her arms somewhere nearby. This calmed her down, because the woman could not do anything terrible, and the neighbors were nearby. So Betty boldly went towards these uninvited guests. But as soon as she got closer and saw a familiar face, her eyes immediately widened. It was her daughter Kate and her children. Now the woman quickened her step even more. She couldn't believe it was really happening. They hadn't seen each other in 10 years. Kate called Betty's name to the woman for reassurance. She turned around, of course. She was holding a baby in her arms and smiling. Mommy, Kate exclaimed and threw herself into her mother's arms. How long it's been, Mom. I'm so happy to see you, Kate. My dear Kate, and my blood. Betty was glad to see her daughter. She was crying with joy. How unexpected it all was. Thomas also joined them, who obviously did not understand who all these people were and what they were doing here. Thomas, remember I told you about my daughter? Well, it was she, Kate, who was explaining Betty to the boy, and the one who left you. The boy asked skeptically. Betty even got angry at being so ill-mannered to say such a thing in front of Kate. What kind of nonsense is that? But then she precipitated herself by reminding him that he was just a little kid. They quickly glossed over the comment. Thomas went into the house to meet Fadia, and Betty ran to boil the kettle. Kate, on the other hand, sat on a chair near the table, cradling the infant, and looked around the house. And nothing had changed here since then, she concluded. Still the same walls, the same dishes. How nice to go back to childhood. Kate watched her mother, who was developing tea in mugs. The children had already found something to do. They began to look at different figures made of wood. Thomas tried to tell them something about these creations, but he was only 6 years old. And of course, it looked pretty funny. A 6-year-old boy describing a geometric figure to a 5-year-old and trying to make it as scientific as possible. Finally, Betty served tea and sat down at the table across from her daughter. She, looking at her, couldn't. The one had dyed her hair, changed her hairstyle, and changed her style and clothes. She was simply unrecognizable. "Honey, it's been so long since I've seen you," Betty said, looking at her daughter. "What's new?" "What news?" "Well, tell me everything." "I can't take it anymore. I haven't seen you in 10 years. Just think about it." Kate smiled, took a sip of tea, and then began her story. "Nothing new, really. Now we live with Alex. We raise kids, we work, we're tired. You probably got a telegram about the birth of the car." The woman pointed to the baby in her arms. "And how's it going with Lesha? Are you doing well? How long have you been married?" 5 years. "And your old husband doesn't hurt you? No more bad behavior? How's my Kelly?" "Oh, it's been so long since I've seen her." "Kelly's fine," smiled Kate. "She's graduating this year. She's dating a guy. Soon she'll make me a grandmother and you a great-grandmother." Kelly was Kate's eldest daughter from her first marriage, and these 2 youngsters from her second. With a new husband. "Well," added the daughter, "it's not all that important. The important thing is that we finally got together. I missed you so much. I'm like a daughter, you're here for the whole summer. Finally, Fedia can swim in our lake." Actually, Kate started with intrigue. "I didn't come here for that." "Yes, of course you did. I wanted to visit you first of all and to show my grandchildren. But there's another reason." "What was it?" Betty listened attentively. She'd absorbed every word her daughter said like a sponge, because then she would not hear the words from her lips for a long time. Or maybe she would never hear them again. She won't be treading this ground much longer. "We're in financial trouble. I'm on maternity leave and Alex got a pay cut at work. We're short of money." "Money? Oh yes, of course I borrowed it, daughter," Betty said with a wave of her hand. She got up from the chair, went into the living room. She started frantically searching through the dresser. Kate realized what she was looking for and stopped her, saying, "No, Mom, I don't want your money." Betty turned around and looked at her questioningly. "I don't want your money," Kate repeated calmly, beckoned her back to his side. Betty sat down next to her, but already with her wives. Now she didn't know exactly what her daughter wanted. "Actually, it's the money that's needed, but not what you want. Much more. And I know another way to get it. That's where I need your help," Kate explained. "So I'm listening," the mother replied with interest. "You know about the maternity capital, but I do. Then you know that I can be given money for certain expenses, children's education, expensive treatment, and so on. But unfortunately, now our situation is such that I need to somehow feed my family. And what the state allocates is non-cash money. That is, I can only spend it on something specific. So recently smart people have told me one way to cash this money. It's perfectly legal, a lot of people do it." Kate paused. "Come on, no shade," Betty hurried on. She was already eerily curious about what her daughter would say. "I can supposedly buy real estate from relatives. They'll give me money for it, you know? Of course, I won't really pay you anything, but I'll own the house and I'll divide it between my children." "You want to buy the house from me?" Betty got worried. "Where will she live? What will happen to her? Does her own daughter want to throw her in the garbage?" "Yes," nodded Kate. "But don't worry, of course you'll keep it all." "Nothing. I don't want your house. I need the money the state will give me, and you're still living here like you have been. You just won't own it. That's all." Betty thought about it. On the one hand, it sounded like a very ingenious scheme, but some kind of scam. If they were exposed, what would happen then? It was very disturbing. Who would do it though? Does anyone really need a house in some godforsaken village with an old grandmother in it? So the woman decided to go along with it. This is her own daughter, and she needs help now. Besides, it wasn't a big deal to just sign the papers. Who cares who the house is registered to? Especially since it's her own blood kidney. Oh great. Then let's bring the documents in a week and we'll formalize everything. Kate was happy. They sat for another 10 minutes, talked about various things, and then the daughter, citing the fact that Maria had to go to bed, went to her room, leaving Betty alone again. Though no, Fedia and Thomas were still in the house. "Grandma Betty, are you selling the house?" With horror in his voice, the boy said, approaching the woman. Tears seemed to come to his eyes. No, actually, yes. But you will leave me. Thomas was already in tears. He seemed to be frightened. No, of course I'll stay here. It's just a formality. So you'll always play with me. You'll never leave me. Of course not. Betty soothed the boy, stroking his shoulders. In the evening, her daughter and her grandchildren left. To think, she hadn't even stayed the night. Betty was very disappointed and upset, but told herself that she certainly had a lot of things to do and worry about. A week went by, and there was no news from Kate. Betty had already decided that Kate had changed her mind, and the deal would not go through. But one weekday morning she received a letter. It said that the woman needed to come to town to get the deed notarized. Betty was very worried about this offer. It had been a long time since she had traveled to the city. Especially now she was old. How could she survive the 3-hour journey in such a state? And on the electric train, she might have to stand it all. But there was nothing to do. Her daughter asked, and Betty couldn't give her a ride. The next day, she started to pack her bag, took her passport, all kinds of documents for the house, and of course, prepared a travel ration. Who knows how long she would be there? Thomas came into the house. He watched the woman's movements very carefully. She was looking for some important paper. When she found it, she shrieked with joy. It was only then that she noticed the boy and was embarrassed. Thomas, surprised, Betty put the folder and things in her bag. "Where are you going?" The boy asked impishly, approaching the woman and peering into her bag. "Going to town." The woman answered indifferently. No, she didn't want to offend the child, but now she was making sure that she didn't forget anything. Otherwise, she would have to go home and drive again, which Betty certainly didn't want to do. The notary is a serious man. Some document was missing. You could already go on your way out. And the letter detailed exactly what to bring with her. In the end, Betty decided to just bring everything she had with her. It was the right thing to do. "You said you wouldn't leave me," upset. Thomas stretched out. "I'm not leaving you, for God's sake." The woman couldn't take it anymore. "I have business to attend to." "You hear me? Business. A grandmother my age has business too. I don't live only for you." The boy pulled away and looked at the woman with eyes full of horror. It was obvious that he was ashamed. But at the same time, these words hurt him terribly. He cried and ran away. It was only then that Betty realized what she had done, taking it out on an innocent boy. What was she like? She wanted to chase him down and explain herself, but time was running out. The train was due in an hour, and she was already terribly late. The train station was not far away, but for a woman of her age, it was quite difficult to walk that distance. She came to the bus stop, got on the right route. Having reached, appeared in the direction of the railway station. There was very little time left. Judging by her broken clock, she was almost running. And as if by the law of meanness, there was a line of several people at the ticket office. Betty, breathing heavily after her run, was the last one to get in. Every now and then she nervously glanced at her watch and fidgeted. "Excuse me," she called out to the woman. The woman in front looked to be about 50 years old. She turned around. "Could you please let me through? I'm very late for my train. It's about to leave." "Why would you do that?" "Allow me," the woman replied. "I may be late too, but I'm standing like everyone else. Is it your problem that you're not on time?" "I really have to. My daughter is waiting for me in town." "We have to go to the notary," Betty explained. "Almost. And my grandson is waiting for me, who has a birthday. I won't give in to you." The stranger insisted. "No, but what a horrible person." Betty thought, why can't you be more merciful to other people and answer a simple request in such a boorish way? Meanwhile, there were only a few minutes left before the train left. Finally, it was the turn of this young woman who stood in front of Betty. "Me to the city for tomorrow's date, please," the woman asked, and then Betty almost had a heart attack for tomorrow. To think of it. And this hardy woman couldn't let it pass her by. She was so upset that she wasn't even angry anymore. She was just hurt by the fact that there were such horrible people living in the world. Just as Betty approached the ticket office, she heard the sound of the train pulling away. All hope in her eyes melted away. She was definitely not getting anywhere now. For today, it was the last train to go to the city from the nearest station. The timetable had been cut in half due to track repairs. Kate will be terribly upset when she doesn't see her tomorrow at 8 o'clock at the notary's office. She let her daughter down. Where are you going? The cashier brought her out of her musings. Betty looked at him with despair in her eyes already nowhere. She answered in a despondent voice and walked back to the bus stop and home from there. Now Betty didn't even know what to do. She didn't have her daughter's phone number. She had, but she had left her number for her a long time ago. Betty had written it down on a piece of paper before, then stuck it somewhere in her desk, and that was the end of it. And Betty hoped she still lived here. The woman climbed the stairs to the high floor. Since the elevator didn't work, she was almost suffocating and hoped Kate was home and would give her a drink. She felt very hot and sick to her stomach. She rang the doorbell. There was no answer for about 3 minutes. Betty decided to call back until she was victorious. Finally, footsteps were heard. But were they already asleep? It was only 10 o'clock at night. But when the door fell open, the woman was startled by what she saw. It wasn't her Kate standing in front of her. It was a young girl of about 25. Her hair was dyed white, and her locks fell beautifully over her shoulders. She was wearing a house robe. A small baby ran out after her, but he was immediately picked up by a strange man. "Good evening. Can I help you?" asked the pretty girl. She seemed a little haggard, but she tried to be polite. Betty liked that right away, but she still didn't understand what this girl was doing in her daughter's house. "I beg your pardon. Isn't this where Kate lives?" Betty inquired in a husky voice. Still she couldn't catch her breath. "Kate, she used to live here." "And who are you to her?" "I'm her mother," the woman said. And after this phrase, her eyes went dark and her ears began to ring. She woke up and was leaning against the wall. "Are you all right?" Concerned, the strange girl tried to help the stranger. Betty seemed to be losing consciousness. Then the girl called for her husband. Together, they brought the named guest to the couch and laid her down, making her comfortable. The girl brought a glass of water and sat down opposite. After a few minutes, Betty felt better. She didn't dare to speak yet and tried to calm down. "Excuse me, please." The woman apologized, taking a sip of water. "The elevator wasn't working and I have a weak heart. It's okay, it happens to everyone." The girl cheered her up. "What's your name?" "Betty." "I'm Daria. It's very nice to meet you. Weren't you looking for your daughter, Kate?" "Yeah, I had that address in my address book. I've never been to her house and I'm rarely in town. Almost never. I had an emergency today. I thought my daughter would meet me and take me in. It was she who called me to the notary. Daria asked me again. Not that she was interested, but rather she was being polite and trying to calm the woman down. "Yes, there's some paperwork to be done," Betty explained, taking another sip of water. "Do you have Kate's cell phone number?" Daria suddenly asked. "No, I've always written her letters. I know it's old-fashioned, but I don't know anything about these phones. Wait, what am I doing?" The young mother exclaimed. "I have her phone number. I'm afraid to ask how." "Well, we bought this apartment from her 2 weeks ago. The price was very attractive because she needed to sell it urgently. I don't know why, but my husband and I went for it, and it was a good deal. Look at the renovations, and we're a young family. She didn't tell me she sold the apartment. She needed the money, but why go to extremes? She did say something about leaving. I don't know where, but leaving very soon," Daria answered, flipping through her phone's contact list. "I found it. We'll call you right now." It beeped. A minute passed, but no one answered. "Let's try again." Daria didn't give up, but when she tried again, the result was the same. Kate was unavailable. How strange. Maybe she's asleep already? "Did you make an appointment?" "No, not at all. But it was just a matter of course. She knows I don't have anyone in town to sleep over. I wanted to go to her place in the afternoon, but I didn't get there until the evening. And it turns out she doesn't even live here anymore." "Don't get me wrong," Daria began carefully, "but I think your daughter is strange. How could she do that to her mother? Well, I'm sure she didn't mean it. Betty herself didn't use those cell phones at all. Why would she? In the village, they say they can get a telegram from them. Well, you'd have to go to the post office, take a bus, and she didn't have the energy. Why didn't her daughter come for her herself? She has a car." Betty somehow came home, sat on the porch, but she couldn't breathe much. and began to think about what to do next. Her thoughts were interrupted again by Thomas, the fidgety Thomas. He seemed to be still reeling from the situation that had happened 2 hours ago. "Why didn't you leave?" he asked. "Did you miss your train?" The woman replied dejectedly. She was in no mood to talk to the boy. Thomas came closer and sat down next to her on the step. It used to be painted green, like the whole porch, but all the paint had long ago almost come off. And now the porch, once so beautiful, looked abandoned and askew. Betty tried not to think about how badly her home had become dilapidated after the death of her husband, who used to take care of the household before his illness. Everything was slowly falling into disrepair. Why hadn't they had a son? He would have helped now, fixed it up, patched it up. And what will you do? Thomas inquired, not allowing the woman to be distracted. "I don't know." She turned her head to the boy. He was looking at her with interest, but there was still resentment in his gaze. "Look, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that she yelled, that she snapped at you. It wasn't your fault. I was just trying to catch the train. You missed it. And the characters in this station are not the nicest characters," questioned the boy. "There was a nasty woman there who treated me very badly. I missed the only train to the city because of her." The boy didn't answer anything, only waggled his eyebrow, and then ran away to his house. Betty did not understand the boy's actions at all. She seemed to apologize, but what can you take from him? He's a kid. She must have really hurt him, and he won't forgive her soon. Children are very fragile, and every remark can go deep into their hearts. And then that resentment could carry over into adulthood. Betty realized that it was not such a big trauma for the child. His parents probably scold him sometimes too. It's normal. Kids can be very naughty sometimes, clingy and fidgety. That's why adults often snap at them. But after a few minutes, Thomas came back. He was very excited about something. The boy came up to the woman and said, "Can you come with us tonight? And you're going somewhere?" Betty was surprised. "My parents have to go into town on business. They let you come with us. Isn't that great?" Betty was almost crying with happiness. She had hurt this child so much, and instead he responded with kindness. "Come here, my wonderful boy," Betty exclaimed, taking Thomas in her arms. He had given her a real gift. A few minutes later, they went to his house to talk to his parents. "Good evening, Betty." The boy's mother said hello. "Thomas told us what misfortune has befallen you. We're here to help. What time do you want to go?" The woman asked. "In an hour. But you'll have to get back on your own. We'll finish all our business in the morning and drive straight back." "Well, that's not a problem. It's much easier to buy a ticket in the city." Betty thanked her neighbor. And so it was. Soon they were on their way. The woman was very glad that she could ride in a spacious and comfortable car. Instead of jolting in a jammed electric train for 3 hours, the ride was quick. Betty gave Kate's address, and they dropped her off just outside her house. She thanked them all profusely and promised to stay with Thomas as long as she needed to, though she always did. In her address her daughter had given her years ago, "Tomorrow I'm sure there'll be a good reason for this behavior. I'll find a place to sleep tonight." Doria glanced at her husband, then nodded affirmatively at him. "Look, stay with us. I'll style you here on the couch, and in the morning I can take you to the notary. How's that sound?" suggested Doria with a smile. Betty couldn't believe her luck. Today already 2 good families had helped her out of such a difficult situation. It was a real stroke of luck. "If you don't mind, I'd be happy to stay," Betty said. So they decided. Doria turned out to be very attentive, shot the couch, fed the poor woman, poured tea. "How come you haven't been in touch for 10 years? expressed Doria, knocking back her tea from the mug. "I don't know, we'd sort of socialized before. Especially her talking about her kids' birthdays, congratulating me. Then it just kind of died down. I didn't even bother. Who needs an old lady like that? You should choose a grave." "No way. What are you talking about?" parried Daria. "You're a wonderful woman, but you're very unlucky with your daughter. My mother died when I was 16. I was crossing the road in the right place, and the driver was drunk. The girl had tears in her eyes. If she were alive, how wonderful, we would have had a wonderful conversation. She would have helped me with my baby. I don't think your Kate appreciates you at all. I'm sorry for your grief. But I think Kate is just that kind of person, not sociable. She was since childhood, and she was often bullied at school for it. And then, when she graduated from the institute and went to work, she became the wrong woman. Family, her own household, work. She didn't care about me. Oh, well, that's your business. The main thing is that you're happy. You are still a young family, you will have more, Betty reasoned, bringing up your children so that they love and respect both you and their father. That they would visit you more often. Or else you really need a glass of water in your old age, she joked awkwardly. Daria laughed. Oh, it's midnight. I think it's time to go to bed, Daria said and began to quickly clear the table. Finally, Betty laid down on her makeshift bed and fell fast asleep. This day had really tired her out. This was certainly not the kind of adventure she had expected. In the morning, the smell of delicious pancakes wafted from the kitchen. Betty got up and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked quite presentable. The couch was soft, not like her home. An old rachat with nails sticking out of the upholstery and cushions that looked more like rocks. Oh, Betty greeted her cheerfully. Daria, good morning. Her husband was already seated at the table eating pancakes. You smell so good, so I couldn't resist and came in. Embarrassed, explained the woman, entering the kitchen. Have a seat, your portion is ready too, Daria said. Betty sat down opposite Daria's husband. We didn't get a chance to meet you yesterday. I'm Betty, the woman introduced herself to the young man. My name is Leo. The guy replied in a friendly manner. There was a family idyll in the kitchen. It was obvious that these people had really married for love. Suddenly, a child's cry came from the room. Daria immediately jumped up and ran out of the kitchen. I apologize for asking such a question. Who do you have? Betty asked. Peter, I know it's a common name, but Daria, I've always wanted to name my baby Peter, Leo replied. Betty nodded with a smile. The choice of a name for her daughter had once been hers too. Her husband John had decided that because she had experienced such tremendous labor pains. So Betty had decided to name her daughter Kate. Kate sat more and more behind books, was not a sociable girl, and then moved away, leaving the old people alone. John died 5 years ago. The money that had been set aside was only enough for a decent funeral and a good wake. But what upset Betty the most was that Kate didn't even come to her own father's funeral, and even afterward didn't show up to support her grief-stricken mother. All in all, she had done a terrible thing. But Betty loved her anyway. Special people are always a little indifferent to the feelings and needs of others. And she considered her daughter special. Otherwise, how could she have gotten into the institute without any money? And then settled down in the capital, and settled down well in this life. Not everyone can boast of that. It is true that she is in a difficult situation now, but she will help her. It is her duty as a mother. After breakfast, Daria went somewhere to do some business, and on the way she took Betty to the notary. The woman really hoped that at least the address given in the letter was correct. When she got out of the car, she immediately saw the big sign on the house across the street. The notary entered the building, went up to the right floor, gave her name at the reception desk, and was invited to the lobby to wait. After a few minutes, Kate finally appeared. She was dressed in a strict formal suit of black blazer, blue blouse, and perfectly lined pants. In her hands, she held a brown file folder with papers. As soon as Kate saw it, her mother immediately approached her. Silently, she nodded. This was strange. Usually people, even when they parted briefly, said hello to each other. No, Betty must have made a mistake somewhere in her upbringing. Not hello, daughter, the mother began. But the daughter immediately interrupted her. Shut up, please, she said sharply. Betty was even a little offended. What kind of attitude is this? Why is that? The woman started to boil up. I want to focus on the upcoming deal. Did you bring all the paperwork? You're not even going to ask me where I slept last night. I'm not interested in who you slept with or where you slept. Oh, now you're talking like that. Betty's taking the sterner tone. She could get angry when she needed to. You'll never get a house with that attitude, you know. No money either. Kate turned to her and forced a smile. All right, Mom, you're right. I was too rough on you. I'm sorry. Same thing. The woman brushed it off. I guess it's the stress. the fear of loss. They all take a toll on me. Of course, when you urgently sell an apartment and not such things happen, Kate's mother remarked at her again. Keep quiet in this room. It's best not to talk too much about the transaction. Everything can play against you. See those uniformed men over there? They're definitely here for a reason. They're probably checking something. Maybe to see if the customers pay their taxes. Do you pay? Mom, I'm quiet. I'm quiet. I'm quiet. I'm attached, offended Betty. They sat like that for about 20 minutes. Kate was looking at something on her phone and Betty was looking around for nothing to do. Everyone was tense, shifting papers, nervous. Finally, a large group of people came out of the door, talking excitedly, and headed for the exit. A secretary approached Kate and Betty and invited them into the office. They entered, pulled out their passports and documents. Behind the desk sat an awfully stern and solid-looking man with expensive glasses. His eyebrows were furrowed in a frown as he studied some papers lying in front of him. Hearing the new arrivals, he looked up. So Betty and Kate? He asked, studying the women with a stern gaze. They nodded affirmatively. Please sit down. The mother and daughter looked at each other and sat down in the chair. Kate, I understand you intend to buy the property from Betty, your mother, right? He asked the question. Kate nodded. May I ask what was the purpose of the man's drinking? Betty had already realized that it was the notary himself. You know, I have 2 small children, not counting my eldest daughter who's a student. Our family has grown and we need more space. I live in a small apartment in the city. After the breakup with my husband, my kids and I have a 1-bedroom. Here you go, please read the paperwork. Betty couldn't believe her ears, how well she was lying. Is that why she sold her big apartment downtown a week ago? Do you live with your husband, or are you a single mom? The notary asked. He left the family as soon as I had my 2nd child. Kate answered pitifully. According to the documents, we are still married, but he plays absolutely no role in the upbringing of the children. Kate answered. So I asked my mother for help. She's willing to remortgage her house to us, because her daughter looked at Betty with her eyes as if she were hinting at something. And then she even stepped on her foot under the table, and Betty realized it was her turn to lie. Yeah, I'm confirming. I'm about to go to the afterlife myself, and they have to live to see it. I can't leave them alone. But I can't leave myself destitute. So I offered my daughter to buy my house. And where will you live? The notary asked. I'll move to a nursing home myself. My daughter found me a very good one. The money from the sale will come in handy. I can't live alone for a long time. It's time to decide. Well, I understand, said the notary. You will pay for this purchase with maternity capital? He asked, turning to Kate. Kate nodded. They were asked to wait for the documents to be prepared. After 2 hours, during which Betty was already terribly tired, everything was finally signed as it should be. So, we'll send the documents electronically to the registry today. When will they register the deal? In about 3 working days, the pension fund will transfer the money to the seller. I'm returning your stamped certificate. We also need a power of attorney so I can get the money for my mom. Kate suddenly said firmly, What's that for? Betty started. Do you want to come here again? Her daughter asked dryly and made scary eyes. But what a thing to agree on. Oh yes, yes, Betty realized. Of course, you'll have to forgive me for being old. After another half an hour, the power of attorney was drawn up. All the best, concluded the notary, signing the document good day. Finally, they were free to go. Betty was terribly anxious to go home, away from all these complications. These papers, the crowds, the hustle and bustle and noise of the big city. When they left the building, Kate, having hailed her mother a cab to the train station, was about to say goodbye and leave on her own. But Betty stopped her. Isn't there anything you want to tell me? She asked sternly. What is it? The daughter was surprised. Why did you sell your nice big apartment? Was it just so that you could get the money for my house? But it's worth a lot more than that. Oh, Mom, that's none of your business. In the meantime, I gotta run. And Kate was about to leave again. But her mother's words stopped her. I went to your old apartment yesterday. A young couple had taken me in by fate. You must know them because they bought your old apartment. Why didn't you even tell me you were leaving? Why didn't you bring me into town for the deal? I thought you were worried about me. I thought you needed me, and all you wanted was that miserable money." Kate's face immediately became grim. It was as if she felt guilty for her transgression. And though she was old enough, she looked like a 5-year-old child being told off by her mother. "Mom, I had a terrible day yesterday. I had a fight with my husband and Masha got sick. I cried all day. I just physically couldn't take you in. We just moved in. There in the small apartment, not to turn around and ourselves," explained the daughter. "And I couldn't come to get you either. If you only knew how busy I was, how I was traveling to solve all these problems. You made your own choice," Betty shrugged. "But you could have at least told me that you couldn't give me a place to stay. I would have come in the morning, and you made me tense up the neighbors. They drove me to my car so I could sleep at a strange girl's house. Mom, I'm sorry." Kate came over and hugged the woman. The woman immediately melted from that hug. Her daughter very rarely hugged her, and today she must have been so conscience-stricken that she decided to be gentle. "You're going home now, aren't you?" Kate asked. "Shall I go to the station with you, if you don't mind?" "But Mom, what are you doing?" And Kate really put her mother in a cab and went with her. Took her to the train, bought her ticket, sat her in a good window seat. And only when she was sure Betty was all right did she get off the train. At last Betty felt both needed and loved. Halfway through the trip, she dozed off and almost slept through her station. She was awakened by the man sitting next to her. When she finally reached her house, she sat down on the native wicket porch again and exhaled a sigh of relief. This adventure had taken so long, and she was so glad to be home. As soon as she was seen from the fence, Thomas immediately came running to her. Grandma Betty turned around. "Did you do all your chores?" shouted Thomas. Delighted. "Yes, dear," replied the woman, stroking the boy's head and rubbing his hair. "And it's my mom's birthday today. Did she invite you? You're coming, aren't you?" Betty thought for a moment. She has looked awful for the last 2 days with absolutely no change of clothes. "What time does she want me to come?" The woman clarified. 8 p.m. Come, it'll be fun." Betty laughed and nodded affirmatively. She had to shower, pick up her dress, dry her hair, and she was ready. It didn't take long to get ready. It wasn't her youth anymore, when it took her 2.5 hours to get ready for the disco. Now she just needed to tidy up. Nothing more was required of her. "Grandma Betty," exclaimed Thomas when he saw Betty entering. He ran over to her and led her over to sit next to him. It was a small group. Thomas's parents and a young neighbor, probably a friend. "I'd like to make a toast," Betty said, when about half an hour had passed since the dinner had started. Everyone turned to her and listened intently. "I want to thank a wonderful woman, a woman without whom this beautiful boy would not have been born. Thomas is so well brought up. Of course, he took an example from his parents, and especially from his mother. You raised him with tenderness and care. I want to say thank you for this wonderful little boy. Thanks to him, I don't feel lonely for a wonderful mom." Everyone was delighted with such a fiery speech and immediately shook their glasses. After that, Thomas even hugged his country grandmother. He also really liked these sincere words. "Thank you very much, Betty," Thomas' mother replied politely. "Without you, I would not have been able to raise such a son. You are a real, beloved grandmother to him, who will give wise advice and tell him a bedtime story. Unfortunately, I cannot boast that I spend a lot of time with my child. No, work, unfortunately, takes away from us the most valuable thing. But every minute spent with him, I treasure more than life for Thomas and his grandmother Betty." Everyone was impressed with tonight's activities. Then we played cards, bingo, and hide and seek. Everyone had a lot of fun. By 11 o'clock, Betty decided to leave. She was already feeling sleepy. She said goodbye to everyone and went to her house. Behind the fence, next to the gate, in the darkness she saw a huge box, but she didn't pay much attention to it. Maybe one of the neighbors was loading something. She would find out tomorrow. But today she was so tired. Betty decided to deal with it this morning. The day had finally come to an end and ended well. Despite all the difficulties and problems with her relationship with her daughter, Kate had made her very upset at first today. but then made her happy. She wants to change, you could tell. There was a reason she walked her mother to the train. Her daughter wished her the best. That's what she wanted to think. The next day brought another surprise under Betty's porch. At breakfast, she remembered the box that stood on the way out of the house. The woman went outside and became convinced that the huge box from yesterday was not a dream. Now she was able to see it from all sides. Attached to the top was a sheet with someone's signature on it. Betty put on her glasses, perused the document, and realized it was a warranty for a washing machine. It wasn't hard to guess that that was what was inside. There was also a note, "Mommy, this is for you." The woman smiled and wanted to go call the neighbors to drag the box into the house. But then Thomas came up behind her and called out, "Grandma Betty, what is this thing?" Betty turned around and with a smile answered, "Washing machine." "Did my daughter give it to me?" she said. "What does it do? What does it do? What does it wash?" After this logical answer, the boy galloped away, and the woman began to think how to get this behemoth into the house and stay alive. But she didn't have to think long. Soon Thomas's dad came to the rescue. He, along with another neighbor, dragged the machine all the way to the kitchen to unpack it, and even hooked it up to water and electricity. It was now in working order. Betty thanked him with 2 jars of fresh garden berry compote. What's she like? She's thoughtful, isn't she? Betty thought of her picture every time she looked at her gorgeous gift. Summer was coming to an end. August always brought some kind of disappointment. For many people, it seemed like the end of a happy life, the end of bright and warm days and good daylight hours. Betty was no exception. Before fall came, she always felt homesick. For Thomas, her ward, this time also meant a lot. He was going into 1st grade this year. He was very scared, and he tried not to think about it, even though almost every conversation centered on it. One day at 4 p.m., when the sun had left its highest point in the sky, Thomas and Betty sat on the porch of the boy's house. It was a particularly sleepy time of the afternoon. Thomas's parents were picking something in the vegetable garden, and Betty was dozing off reading a book. "Is it still possible not to go to school?" the boy asked, looking at his fingers. It was as if he saw some mystery in them. Betty woke up and asked him to repeat the question, which the boy did. "What's that?" "You what?" The woman was indignant. "I already understand everything. And now I have to get up every day at 6 o'clock a.m. and go to the school. But I can get the knowledge on my own." "You have strange thoughts for a 1st grader. You should strive for knowledge. You don't know how much more you'll learn. And school isn't just about studying. It's about socializing with other kids. You have to make friends. Why do I need friends? Can I live on my own? Can you imagine what would happen to me if it wasn't for you and your parents? I always need help, and you as my friend always help me out. Can't I cope with my own problems?" The boy wouldn't stop. Life is like that. In general, she likes surprises. Sometimes they're pleasant, sometimes they're terrifying. Is life so complicated that in order to live, you have to learn? Unfortunately, yes. Life is often unfair to people. Some get everything, others get nothing. There are many people living in the world, and some of them have bad intentions. It's not our fault, but we have to live with it. "What a lot of obscure words you say, Grandma Betty." Thomas couldn't take it anymore and pouted his lips. "Well, someday I'll be gone, and you'll remember my words." That was the end of their conversation. There was no point in explaining to a 7-year-old boy the complex system of big life. He's too young to understand anything. For him, the world is rainbow-colored and beautiful. In his opinion, there are only kind and sympathetic people in it. But that's not true at all. And soon Betty was convinced of this once again by her own experience. Soon the real fall came. Yellow leaves were slowly falling from the trees. Bursting, brown, chestnuts, sprouts were lying everywhere, and a tree was growing just opposite Thomas's parents' house. The temperature was gradually dropping. Betty increasingly began to prefer reading a book at home to reading outside. She asked the local men to chop enough wood for the rest of the fall, maybe even the long winter. Now Betty stoked his stove almost every day. Thomas left for town, and before he did, he said a long and tearful goodbye to his grandmother. He really did not want to go to school. The boy was afraid that he would forget about his grandmother Betty and would never come here again. After all, childhood was over, in his opinion. But of course, it wasn't. And Betty was already looking forward to the next summer, to meet again her dear boy who was growing up before her eyes. One day in October, Betty was washing dishes, and through the window, she saw some strangers waiting outside her house. They were inspecting the facade and occasionally pointing at the house with their hand. The window through which Betty was looking was on the side and could not be seen from the facade. The woman felt a little uneasy. Many of the neighbors had already left, and the ones that remained didn't know her at all. Nor had she done anything to them to have any claim on her. She wiped her hands on her apron and went to the front door. Looking through the peephole, she made sure that these people were very interested in her house for some reason, and opened the door. They immediately turned their eyes on her. "Good afternoon. Do you need something?" asked Betty. But when she saw the face of a familiar family, she was almost speechless. "Betty," the girl exclaimed. "What are you doing here?" It was the same family she'd stayed with in Kate's former apartment. They were the ones her daughter had sold the apartment to. And now they stood in front of her, not understanding how this woman they had once sheltered could be here. "I live here," simply Betty answered. "You live here?" Leo marveled, looking around the house. "Yes." The woman continued, not understanding what they wanted from her. "What are you doing here?" "Betty?" "Oh, Betty," exhausted, stretched Daria. "Come into the house. I'll explain everything honestly. This is all very strange." Betty, of course, gladly invited them into the house. She played the kettle, poured for her guests, took out some strawberry jam. "And what are you without a baby?" Betty inquired, seated herself on the armchair opposite the sofa. "Here's the thing," Daria began. It was obvious that she didn't know how best to start this conversation. The topic was too difficult for her. She didn't know how Betty would take the news. Your daughter sold us this house and lot." The girl fell silent and looked up to see the woman's reaction. The woman sat with a devastated face. First, there was a look of incomprehension in her eyes, then fear, then anger, and then anger turned to despair. Tears flowed from the poor woman's eyes. "You're not wrong," Betty cried. "Maybe she sold you another lot, and you came to this one by mistake." "Unfortunately, no," Daria replied with sympathy in her voice. "This is exactly the right address. Why did you buy this house if you knew I lived here? That's the problem. Kate assured us that no one had lived here for a long time, and she priced it so low, we couldn't afford it. Plus, she called us first, because we'd already bought an apartment from her. She told us that we could also buy a summer house on favorable terms." "Oh my God, I sold my own mother," the woman exclaimed in tears. Daria sat up to her to cheer her up at least by stroking her back. "I don't understand why your daughter did that, but she was in a hurry, so she had to sell the property immediately." "What was her hurry?" Betty perked up, as if coming out of a trance and depression. "She didn't say. All she said was that it was urgent. So we got the paperwork done right away. Literally the day after the offer, we didn't even go to see the house because Kate assured us it was a scrap." "Oh my God," Betty exclaimed. "How could the heart not be in that line? She told me to sign the house over to her, and I did it out of the goodness of my heart. God, what a terrible thing she's done. She'll get that back. And my bitter tears and my blood too. It's called pot luba. All my life I raised her, I clothed her, fed her, breathed her shade. And here is my daughter's gratitude." "I understand your grief," Daria said quietly. "But you also understand us. We had no idea that anyone lived here at all. Then we would never have bought your house. Alas, what grief." The woman agonized. "Where can I go now, old decrepit women? Have mercy, Lord merciful. What will happen now?" "Well, wait. Daria calmed her down. "No one is kicking you out of here." She turned to her husband, looking for support. He nodded in agreement. "We were only planning to come here for the summer and weekends anyway. You're not kidding? Is it true?" The woman looked at her with hope in her eyes. "Of course it's your home. You've lived here all your life. It doesn't matter who owns it. I'm sure we'll become friends." Daria encouraged her. She hugged Betty tightly and she slowly calmed down. Everything turned out just as Daria had said it would. They really became friends. The family came the following weekend. Betty vacated her room with the twin bed and moved into Kate's former room. Now it was even disgusting to be here after what she had done. Kate herself did not answer her calls or emails. The subscriber was unavailable whenever she was called. It seems the washing machine was her parting gift. "Please come to the table," Betty called out to the family, putting the soup on the table. She had made an amazing borscht, which was appreciated by all the family. "Betty, Leo, and I have something to offer you," Daria said. "My husband, and I noticed that you have a stove instead of gas heating. It's dangerous because it can catch fire. And you are not old enough to use the stove every day. And the rooms are pretty damp. One stove, the whole house doesn't heat up properly." Sure, Betty agreed absent-mindedly. "My house is already bad, but what can you do?" "But that's just the way it is," Daria continued. "So we decided to install gas, put batteries, and in general, to make repairs, to improve the house, so that it looks more modern and was more comfortable to live. What do you think about it?" "I'm all for it, Daria. I'll even help you with money. My pension is small, but you don't have to," Leo smiled. "We can handle the expenses ourselves." So they came to an agreement, and from the next weekend, Leo brought in the workers who installed the radiators and installed the pipes. Soon gas was piped in. Life began to get better. Betty helped the family as much as she could, cooking, cleaning. Her life was now very much like that of a servant. But she didn't feel that way because she had always been bored alone. Who was there to do anything for? Now she had a kind of family, which needed her support because the young mother was busy with the child, repairs, and some other remote work. And she was always sitting at the portable computer. And Betty was only too happy to make cakes for the oven, to put tea on, to set the table for everyone. The feeling that she could be useful again gave her immense pleasure. Little by little, the house was repaired. The walls were covered with insulation and plastered with wood paneling. The floors were renewed. The roof was repaired. No more leaks from the attic. The old stove was replaced with a modern fireplace stove and even changed the old furniture. Now the sofa wasn't so close to her feet, and the table didn't burrow every now and then. At the worst possible moment, Betty rejoiced at these changes. This was a family that had become so close to her. Maybe she shouldn't have to live here. But still, thanks to them, her own life had really changed for the better. It was the 20th day of a sunny, warm April. The flowers were coming down in the garden and at Betty's. One of those spring days was her birthday. She was not used to celebrating it. Nor was she rarely congratulated by anyone now. Her own daughter had stopped doing that a long time ago. Close friends who died, who left, only her husband remained. When he died too, there was no one to even remember this date. But this year, there were such drastic changes that they could not help but affect this wonderful holiday. All morning, she was not allowed outside and forbidden to look out the window. Meanwhile, there was something going on behind the walls. It was hard not to hear, even with her poor hearing, the sound of a big car or a tractor coming. "What's going on in there? Can I go outside now, Betty?" Daria's confused. "Patience, Betty, patience," the girl answered cryptically. Finally, after 3 p.m., she was let out of the house. More precisely, she was blindfolded and led somewhere far away. When Betty smelled the pungent odor of fresh wood, she was already beginning to guess the surprise. When her eyes were finally opened, she almost screamed with happiness like a 5-year-old. In front of her stood the very real little house with carved stavim railings. The stairs were also beautifully decorated with different patterns. The red brick roof glowed in the sun. "Dear Betty," Leo began his speech, standing at the entrance to the door of the cottage. "There are many things I would like to say to you on this day, but I think our gift will replace 1,000 words. We are very grateful to you for giving your room to our little son, who will grow up and consider you his grandmother. You said you would live in the living room. But of course, that's no good. Now you are almost a member of our family, and we want to show our gratitude with this gift. We bought you your own little house. As you can see, it has everything from a TV to a toilet. We want you to feel comfortable too and have your own space. This house was originally intended to be a guest house, but then my lovely wife decided it would be yours. Alas, but when I die, it will be a guest house," awkwardly joked Betty, wiping away a Betty tear. Daria fake outraged. The woman only laughed in response. "Anyway," continued Leo, "the whole team of workers and I would like to wish you a happy birthday and wish you health and many more years of life." Hooray! Betty thanked everyone and was finally able to enter her new home. It didn't feel like a guest house at all. It was a full-fledged house, just a little scaled down in size. There were 2 rooms. The larger room served as the living room, adjacent to the cozy kitchen, and the door leading to the bedroom exited from there as well. The clean, sparkling tiled bathroom moved Betty to tears. Of course, there was no furniture yet, but as Leah said, it was a start. A week later, the house was already being furnished. The first thing they did was to install gas and electricity. Betty was bought a very soft bed. She was embarrassed by so many gifts because the family had done it all at their own expense. And why? She was a complete stranger to them. Betty didn't understand that because they had no kinship. They are not even distant relatives to each other. Yet these people cared for her more than anyone else had in her entire life. Summer came. It had been incredibly hot since June. Everyone was already wearing shorts, and Leo and Daria had put a pool in the backyard. Finally, Thomas came to the cottage. Betty was looking forward to his arrival and even gave him a box of candy. "Grandma Betty, do you live here now?" The boy wondered. "Yes, honey. It's a long story, but it's all right now. Someday I'll find time to tell you this terrifying yet wonderful story. Now let's go sunbathe them," Betty replied. The boy did not hide his surprise. He still did not understand who these people were and why they were living at Betty's grandmother's house and she had been moved. The family vacationed together in the sunshine. Thomas and Peter immediately found a common language and were already splashing in the pool together. Leo and Daria were lying under an umbrella so that the rays of the hot sun would not reach them. "You know, I used to be a student of history and went to various excavations in the summer for practical training." Suddenly, Leo, who was resting next to me on a chaise lawn, said out of the blue. Betty turned to him. "Did you miss the antiquities?" She suggested with a laugh. "Not that I missed it. More like yes. I was just looking around at this land, at the old church in the village, and I remembered what you said. You said there was another house on this very spot, and the village is over 100 years old." "Right." Betty nodded affirmatively. "What if there was something left here from that time?" Very often, if you haven't done any excavations or changed the foundations of a house, you can find very interesting things, the boy explained. Here to the conversation joined the interested Daria, who came out of the pool and covered herself with a towel. "Do you want to make a dig?" Enthusiastically, like a child, she asked, nodding with joy. "Well, I didn't say excavate. Where? When?" Thomas perked up. "This topic has affected everyone on this site." "So good." Leo laughed, raising his hands. "Next weekend I'll bring a metal detector and we'll look for something." Everyone actively supported the idea. Daria told Betty what she wanted to find here. What if there is a silver spoon or coins from the XVI century? She marveled as she put Peta to bed. Would there be? The tired Betty answered monotonously, stirring her tea with a spoon. "I'm sure it will." A week later, Leo, as promised, brought the metal detector. Everyone crowded around the guy while he assembled the machine. "Are we going to find old skeletons here?" asked the restless Thomas. "I hope not," answered Daria sarcastically, and everyone laughed. Finally, the metal detector was ready for use. Leo stood up and began to move it from side to side. He barely nodded. The guy slowly walked forward and moved the device. Finally, the metal detector banged rather loudly. Thomas even covered his ears from the sound. It was clearly not a pleasant one. "Oh my God, found it!" shouted Leo. He frantically began to dig in the sand with his hands, but when he picked up the thing that lay among the grass, he was very upset. It was an ordinary gold earring, modern, not antique. He shook it from the ground, and Daria immediately jumped up to him. "My earring, remember I told you back in February that I lost it to Betty. did you really find it?" The girl marveled, but at least someone was happy to find it. Leo didn't give up, he kept looking. From time to time, he found rusty nails or a broken tin spoon, but there was no treasure. The guy wanted to call off the search, and everyone was getting tired. But suddenly, the metal detector banned in a completely unexpected place near an old barn. There, Leo did not find any earrings or nails. It was clear he needed to go inside the barn. But the problem was that it was locked. "Betty, do you have the keys to this shed?" asked the guy to the woman. "I'm afraid to cheat. Maybe there is somewhere, but it'll take a long time to find it." "Upset," said Betty. "In that case, we'll break it," said Leo. He brought a real crowbar from home and easily opened the lock. It was very weak, and the boards were literally falling apart in his hands. The junk, like the house itself on an old foundation, was probably over 100 years old. As they entered, the metal detector was again forbidding. It promised very loudly. Daria and Thomas covered their ears to at least shield themselves from the horrible noise. There was no floor in the barn. The ground here was completely bare, hard, from the pressing, like stone. "Looks like we need a sturdy shovel," Leo reported, and went off again to find the right tool. "Betty, do you think there's anything worthwhile in there?" asked Daria the woman. "I really hope so, because it would take quite a lot of effort to find out," she said. 5 minutes later, the guy came back with a huge shovel. He once again ran the metal detector over the location of the supposed treasure. The machine was again forbidding, which meant that it was necessary to act. The earth did not yield to the shovel for a long time. It was terribly hard. But in the end, Leo did start digging. The excavation took several days. The housemates were already laughing and teasing Leo to stop doing nonsense. He would spend so much effort and find only another rusty lock. One day the family, except for the hard-working treasure hunters, sat around the kitchen table drinking tea. Thomas, who had come to visit Peter, was talking about his new school friend. "I hope this Roma is a good boy," Betty remarked. "Well, of course he is," replied Thomas. "He and I are building a model airplane together." Suddenly, they heard a scream from the backyard. "Oh my God, Jesus Christ!" Leo yelled. Everyone immediately looked at each other and rushed to the scene. "Leo, are you okay?" shouted Daria Du, running to the barn. Daria, "Betty, hurry up and get over here," continued to yell the guy, as everyone came running and approached. What they saw struck them to the core. At the bottom of a wide hole, almost 1.5 meters deep, they could see the lid of a large wooden chest with reinforced iron strips. Leo shone a flashlight deep into the hole and could not believe his eyes. What was it? His wife marveled. "It's a real chest, a bloody old chest. We have to get it out of there." So Leo did. The final excavation took a couple more days. The heavy trunk was helped out by Father Thomas. Altogether, the household and neighbors stood around and looked at this amazing find with curiosity. The box had a thick chain on it, a lock, and unlike the lock on the barn, this one did not fall apart. It was very strong, though rusty, as if it had been made of cast iron. The wood, on the other hand, was cracked, but not once. The chest seemed very sturdy. "Daria, bring it. I'm afraid to cheat. Maybe there is somewhere, but it'll take a long time to find it." "Upset," said Betty. "In that case, we'll break it," said Leo. He brought a real crowbar from home and easily opened the lock. It was very weak, and the boards were literally falling apart in his hands. The junk, like the house itself on an old foundation, was probably over 100 years old. As they entered, the metal detector was again forbidding. It promised very loudly. Daria and Thomas covered their ears to at least shield themselves from the horrible noise. There was no floor in the barn. The ground here was completely bare, hard, from the pressing, like stone. "Looks like we need a sturdy shovel," Leo reported, and went off again to find the right tool. "Betty, do you think there's anything worthwhile in there?" asked Daria the woman. "I really hope so, because it would take quite a lot of effort to find out," she said. 5 minutes later, the guy came back with a huge shovel. He once again ran the metal detector over the location of the supposed treasure. The machine was again forbidding, which meant that it was necessary to act. The earth did not yield to the shovel for a long time. It's our treasure. Don't you want to give our child a happy life? Our child already has a good life, her husband told her calmly. And hiding this treasure will result in a fine. And a very big one, Daria begged him. Let's think about it for at least a week and decide what to do about it. Maybe someone can give us some advice. Who can give us some advice? What advice? If you're going to hide this treasure, who are you going to tell? Have you forgotten about the neighbors? They already know. Daria hung her head and was silent. Betty had been silent all this time, but this time she decided to say something. I agree with Daria. You can't decide things in a hurry. We should think about it carefully, at least to find out to whom we should hand over the find. The police are hardly a good option. Leo did not agree for a long time, but finally the women convinced him to wait. Life went on as before, and outwardly nothing had changed, as if they had never found the most valuable treasure in their lives. And somewhere far away from here, in the Czech Republic, lived Kate, who had now left the country. It had been over a year since she'd snuck out without even saying anything to her mother. It was for this very purpose that she had sold all her possessions to go abroad. The thing is, she and her husband had run up huge debts. He was put on the meter by the very real bandits, to whom he owed a large sum. Thus, the family hoped to escape persecution and solve all their difficulties. And this they, strangely enough, succeeded. One evening, while tidying up in front of the mirror for another outing, Kate saw that an old friend was calling her. They'd been very close since childhood. Born and raised in the same village, they both moved to the capital, where their paths diverged. But after a few years, they became friends again and kept in touch. Katenka, my friend, said into the phone. Anya. The woman was surprised. How long has it been since I heard your voice? How are you? What did you decide to call and reminisce about your youth? I'm fine. I'm calling to tell you something. Is it about your mother? Those words really intrigued Kate. Yesterday, I was at a party with my relatives. Well, there was Grandma Nina, Aunt Natasha, my Grandma Lucy. Maybe you remember? Anya asked. Well, how can you forget her? A fighting woman. So she told me something that made the hair on my head stand on end. You won't believe it, but don't tell the shadows. Kate nudged her friend with curiosity. Grandma Lucy told me a legend. At first I thought it was all nonsense, but as soon as I heard your name, I realized it was true. She said that a long time ago, a baron who lived in this village in our region fell in love with this serf. He courted her in every possible way. They even had children together. One day he gave her a whole chest full of the Tsar's chervonets, jewelry, and other valuables. Times were troubled. He probably decided to save at least some of the family treasures. He thought no one would be looking for it in her backyard. Anyway, this is the backyard. Don't fall down. That's where your mother's house is now. Wow, Kate marveled, waving. Yes, yes, confirmed her friend. And in the revolution, this former serf Baring gave her a free hand. He hid the chest somewhere in the ground. But she didn't have time to take it back. She was killed then, and all her children. The Baron's bastards. The chest has never been seen since. And rumor has it it's still lying around in your mother Kate's house. Kate felt devastated when she heard about her mother. She still didn't fully understand the meaning of her friend's words. But as soon as she realized how the situation had turned out, she answered very sharply and firmly, "Thank you for the information. A friend has to do me a favor." Hi, she called her husband. The theater is canceled. We're going home. In Betty's house, or rather in her former house, everything was very quiet. The housemates no longer argued about the trunk. They hid it in a safe place where even the most insidious thief could not get into. One early morning, when everyone was still asleep, Daria heard a knock on the door. The knock was so nasty and annoying that she had to get out of the warm bed and go open the door. She hadn't expected to see Kate at the door. She was clearly in an irritated mood. But hello, haughtily greeted the former landlady of the apartment. Hello, Kate. Why are you here? Daria began, but she was interrupted by this boorish woman. I will ask the questions, she said, and pushing Daria out of the way, entered the house. She examined him for a long time, and then just as primly asked, "Where is my mom, Betty?" "So it is. Did you evict her?" "How dare you?" Kate screamed. "You won't even let me say a word." Daria couldn't take it anymore. "Betty lives in the new house we built for her. You haven't been in touch for a year. You sold the house with your own mother." Leo came in, and then Betty came out of the yard. No one expected to see Kate here. "Kate," Betty said. There was anger in her eyes. "Mommy, how glad I am to see you." Kate immediately changed her appearance and went to her mother to hug her. But she refused the hug. The mother forcefully pushed her daughter away and uttered terrible insults. "You're not my daughter anymore." "What are you saying? Have you lost your memory? You left me here alone, and then you sold everything I had. And I believed you, I loved you. You're just a fraud. How dare you?" Kate was indignant and rushed at her own mother. But then Leo's heavy hand fell on her shoulder. "Kate," he began sternly, "you're not welcome here. I declare this transaction invalid. Can you say goodbye to this house?" Kate snapped and left with her head held high. Everyone had a bitter aftertaste from this visit. Unexpected guests from the past. Everyone gathered in the living room and began to think what to do next. "I don't think she was joking that she canceled the deal," Daria said fearfully. "I think she's just bullying us," Betty said. "She looks very arrogant," Leo remarked. "And the main question is, why does she need all this?" Daria thought, putting her hand under her head. "She just appeared out of the blue, accosted us, and makes some kind of scandal. What for? God only knows where she's been all this time and what's on her mind." Leo caught it. "But most importantly, we must not tell her about the treasure. She must never know that we have found something here. Betty, do you understand? She's not my daughter anymore, and she'll never know." "I guarantee you that," Betty replied firmly. She was really confident in her decision. Kate didn't just undermine her authority, she betrayed her mother and thereby destroyed everything that Betty so zealously wanted to preserve. She didn't need this warm relationship, she didn't need her mother. She is a cruel and cynical person. I don't know where she got such cynicism and indifference, but now it definitely wasn't Betty's daughter. This was no longer the naive girl she had once loved so much. 2 days have passed since this unexpected visit. Betty was walking with Thomas and discussing school matters with him. Suddenly, the boy asked a completely unrelated question. "Grandma Betty, aren't you going to give me the gold coins from this treasure?" "I'm sorry," the woman did not understand. "Well, I helped you find the treasure. Don't I deserve a reward?" "Thomas, I'm sorry, but this money doesn't belong to you." Asterisk, 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 translated using www.deepa.com/translator. Free version. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Who do they belong to then? The boy suddenly raised his voice. "To you and your new family. You don't need me anymore. That's not what friends do." "Thomas, you've got it all wrong." The boy dropped Betty's hand sharply, stopped and looked at her with an angry and hurt look. "Are you a bad friend?" he said, turned around and ran back to his house. Betty was left alone. She didn't understand why Thomas was upset with her. He was already 7 years old. Hadn't he been taught not to take other people's things? She returned home in a terrible mood. Thomas was nowhere to be seen. He seemed to be holed up at home. In the evening, she went to the big house. Daria and Leo were having dinner and discussing something heatedly and cheerfully. She didn't want to intrude on their family idyll. Betty was about to quietly leave, but the couple did. Betty spotted her. "Where are you going to sit with us?" The guy invited her in. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you," the upset woman explained, approaching the table where the couple were sitting. "On the contrary, we wanted to ask you for a wife," said Daria. "Alex and I want to go for a walk for half an hour, and Petya has no one to leave him with. Would you mind?" "Sure. I'll sit with him." Betty answered ahead of the request. The young people thanked the woman profusely and left. "How wonderful it is here," Daria marveled, walking slowly in step with her husband. Suddenly, she noticed a small figure by the lake. The man was sitting on the grass and throwing stones into the water. In him, the girl recognized Thomas. What is he doing while late at night by the lake? where his parents were looking. Daria already wanted to go and ask the boy what happened and why he is walking so late alone. But suddenly a dark female figure approached him. Leo and Daria hid behind the bushes. The boy was ready at any moment to jump out and protect the boy, but for now it was not necessary. They recognized the woman as Kate and decided to overhear the conversation. "Oi, hi. Are you here alone?" asked Kate, sitting down to Thomas. He was still angry and didn't answer right away. Not alone anymore. Finally, he answered rudely. "Such a little boy better not go so late to the lake. What if he dragged the mermaids away?" Ironically said Kate. "Mermaids don't exist, it's a legend." "But what if it's not a legend, but the truth?" "People just don't believe in it because they've never seen them themselves. The legend exists to scare little children. But I'm an adult and I know where it's true and where it's false." Thomas persisted. "But I don't think my legend will scare you away. What's even better?" "This story isn't fiction." "What story?" the boy asked interestedly. "Are you sure you want to know?" Kate intrigued him. "Of course I do." "Well then, listen. Many years ago, there were ordinary people living in this village. They farmed and were very poor. But one day a rich baron came here and fell in love with one of the villagers. He gave her a chest with a lot of jewelry as a sign of his loyalty and love. But this poor girl was so afraid that the treasure would be stolen that he buried them in the barn. She didn't even have time to try on these beautiful ornaments. She was brutally murdered by terrible men who destroyed the old power and even massacred the royal family. And where is the truth in this?" Thomas persisted. "And the truth here is that this girl lived on the site of your grandmother Betty's house today." "She's not my real grandmother. I'm upset," the boy admitted. "I know, I overheard you two talking by accident while you were out walking. She did a terrible thing. But the worst part is, she doesn't want to share that wealth with anyone. I'm not her family, I understand." Thomas confessed. "Thomas, don't you remember me?" Kate asked a question. The boy tried to see her face, but the darkness hid her features. She took out her phone and dedicated the flashlight to the pumpkins. "Are you Kate, Grandma Betty's daughter?" Thomas exclaimed. It was so loud that Kate CEC'd at him. "Hush, hush. No one can know about our conversation. You don't want all the money to go to unworthy people living in Grandma Betty's house. Of course I don't. She's my friend, not theirs. That's why I'm offering you a deal," Kate said enthusiastically. "The deal? What's that?" "It's a contract between you and me. You tell me something, and I'll give you half of this treasure in return." "What can I tell you?" asked the boy interestedly. "You know where they hid the chest, don't you?" "They didn't tell me," Thomas began uncertainly. "But one day I was playing catch with Peter, and we accidentally threw it on the second floor. There, in the bathroom at Aunt and Uncle Leo's, was that trunk. They put it in a big dirty laundry basket. It was open that day and I saw it there." "Oh great, then a deal is a deal. You've given me information, now expect a reward. There's just one condition." "What's that?" "Don't tell anyone about our conversation, or it won't work." They shook hands and Thomas, very satisfied, went home. Kate was about to leave, but she heard a rustling in the shore bushes. She came closer and listened, but saw nothing. She thought she saw something, she said, and left. When Daria and Leo were sure that there was no one else on the lake, they breathed a sigh of relief. Daria was still trying not to breathe. What the hell was that? Leo finally perked up. He was just furious at what was happening. Don't you see? The little boy was being used for his own selfish purposes. And he, knave as he was, believed it all. So she's going to steal the treasure from us. The husband wouldn't let it go. Yes, Leo, yes. We've got to run home and tell Betty. So they rushed into the house and caught Betty, Mila rocking her and the baby. She looked at their solid faces with incomprehension, and the couple was just panicked and all nervous. What's wrong? The woman asked in surprise. Putting a blanket over the baby, he finally fell asleep. Daria and Leo told everything they had seen and heard. Betty almost had a heart attack. She realized that her daughter was a real piece of work, but not to that extent. They talked about it for a long time and tried to figure out what to do in the end, Leo said. Okay, everyone, stop. I have a plan. They didn't know when the robbery was going to take place, but something told them that Kate wouldn't be dragging her feet about it. And they were right. The very next night, they spotted her creeping around in a protective colored raincoat in the bushes outside their house. She thought it was a great disguise, but she was very wrong. In the evening, all the family members took up their positions. Kate snuck into their house through an open window. She thought it was an oversight on the part of the owners, but even this little thing had been thought out by them. Everything had been done to trap her. The woman believed the knave Thomas and went to the bathroom. Though she herself turned out to be no less knave than the boy. The bathroom was located across from some sort of door. She assumed it was someone's bedroom. Leo's bedroom with Daria couldn't be ruled out, so the woman shouted as quietly as possible into the bathroom and searched for a large laundry basket. It didn't take long to find one, but what stupid people, Kate thought. To hide such valuable things so carelessly. Suddenly, she'd heard a sound in the hallway, as if something not very heavy had fallen. She turned around and listened, but saw no one and went back to her business. She carefully, without making a sound, pulled out that jewelry box. Not as big as they said, she thought, but as she opened it, she realized how bad it all was. That chest was a fake. All it contained was baby bling. She almost screamed out loud at the disappointment. Just then, the bathroom door slammed sharply shut, followed by footsteps and screams, "Call the police." She's trapped. Kate tried to open the door, but it looked like something like a mop had been inserted into the handle, blocking the passage. And Kate was indeed trapped. There were no windows in the bathroom. There was nowhere to escape. She realized that this was a real defeat. There was nothing left for her to do but wait for the police to arrive. The door was answered half an hour later. No one had spoken to her during that time, and she couldn't even hear the conversation outside. Everyone was talking in whispers. It pissed her off terribly. As soon as the door opened, she was greeted by a full man in a police uniform. He immediately and ordered her to turn around. She didn't resist and obeyed. Handcuffs were placed on her hands. The man uttered the most banal phrase she had heard 1 billion times in movies. "You're under arrest. Do you have the right to remain silent? Follow me." As she left the bathroom, she met Daria's eyes. She was glowing with joy that their plan had succeeded. And Kate was terribly angry. She hadn't counted on these people being so resourceful. The plan was very simple. Leo and Daria were in their bedroom exactly until Betty, who was standing in the snowy bathroom, closed in, signaled to the crowd with her foot. Immediately, Leo jumped out of the room and slammed the bathroom door shut. The plan worked like a Swiss watch. Kate was put into the car and the family followed. They were all heading to the police station. "Why did you sneak into someone else's house?" asked the serious man in the interrogation room. Kate had never been in such a room before. To some extent, she was even curious about how such things happened. "In another situation, of course, I refused to speak without my lawyer," Kate answered indifferently. "You want to take this case to trial? Then I'll tell you what the outcome will be. Not only will you pay a fine, but you could go to jail. Maybe the investigation will uncover some more of your shady dealings. Is that what you want? What do you know about my business?" Kate asked him suspiciously. Of course, it was a cheap manipulation. She wanted to change the subject. "You either answer the question or stay in the detention center until the trial." The investigator pressed her. "I wanted to take things from my mother's house, and she took it and said I was not her daughter. You see, she was very upset with me for something. Of course, it hurt me, so I decided to take at least something that belonged to me. And what was that? Some personal items, jewelry?" Kate replied defiantly. "Good." After a moment's silence, the investigator concluded. He stood up and left the interrogation room. 2 police officers then came after the woman and took her behind bars. She tried to break free, but nothing worked. It was the turn of Betty and her family. They asked to be interviewed together, for they were not hiding anything from each other. "So you knew about her breaking into your house?" asked the man with the glasses. "Yes. That's why we were ready for the attack," answered Daria. "Why didn't you call the police at the first suspicion?" "Because I'm sorry, no offense to you." But the police work in our country is a bit strange. If we called you beforehand, we'd have scared her off, and she'd have done the theft another day. Then we certainly wouldn't have caught her at the scene of the crime." Leo replied sarcastically, "But she didn't steal anything from you. That's what the investigator asked." "No, but there was a break-in. She was trespassing on private property," Betty replied. "She said she wanted to take personal items out of resentment towards her mother." "Is that right?" Everyone looked at each other. There was a look of surprise on their faces. "No," Leo finally answered. "It's a blatant lie." "In that case, what did she want to steal from you?" the investigator asked. Everyone looked at each other again. It was as if they were communicating with their eyes. And Daria gave Lev a meaningful affirmative nod. "We better show it and formalize it," the boy said uncertainly. "In what way?" The man was surprised. "These are historical treasures, which according to the law must be withdrawn by the state," finally confessed Leo. At that moment he felt relieved, and everyone in the room seemed to feel the same way. Maybe it was for the best, not getting rid of something that was bringing so much complexity into their lives as well. The slightly surprised investigator agreed with them and went to their home. Leo briefly told him the backstory of where they found the chest, how they found it, and why they were doing it. Then he told him about Kate, who had first sold her mother's house, and then threatened them to take back both it and the lot. And finally, they reached the very object of all the quarrels and disagreements, the ill-fated chest, and it was hidden right under Leo and Daria's bed. "Well," began the policeman, examining the contents of the chest, "it should be sent for examination, and if it is confirmed its historical value, then there you will already deal with it. I have to confiscate it and hand it over to the appropriate authorities." Everyone agreed, and the chest was confiscated. The conflict with Kate was resolved, and she was fined for disorderly conduct and released. And it seemed like the story was finally over. But the next day, Thomas showed up at their house. He cried bitterly and couldn't stop crying. Betty comforted the poor boy for a long time, not understanding what had upset him so much. She gave him candy and tea. Finally, Thomas was able to calm down a little and tell her what was bothering him so much. "I'm sorry," Grandma Betty cried on her lap. "Forgive me, I'm so sorry." What are you? The woman encouraged him. "But what's your fault?" "I told your bad daughter where you hide that damn chest. That's what's causing all this trouble. But we've made up our minds. Sweetie, Thomas, come on, I'm so sorry. I quarreled with you and betrayed you immediately. I'm a terrible friend. It's my fault too. I shouldn't have turned you down so harshly. We all have our faults. But the most important thing is that we can accept our mistakes. We learn from them. That's the main thing. Grandma, I love you so much." The next few months went great. Summer was coming to an end again. Thomas was getting ready for his second year of school, and Peter was finally about to enter kindergarten. The historical appraisal confirmed that the chest with its contents was a heritage property, so it now belonged to the state. However, they were paid good interest for the treasure they had found. Leo was promoted in his position at work. They could now afford to buy a large, roomy family car. The Thomas parents became firm friends with Daria and Leo. A wonderful friendship developed between them. They invited each other to picnics, birthdays, and celebrations. The two families became very close. Betty was no longer alone in the remote village all year long, but now she had a separate room in her apartment. Now Betty's grandmother lived with them in the winter and took care of the child, while the young parents went out to friends or to the movies. And when everyone was at work, and Peter in the garden, Betty could enjoy a city social life unknown to her before. She went to libraries, parks, museums, socialized with her peers, even took up sports walking with a group of like-minded people. And there hasn't been any news about Kate in a while. Where did she go? What happened to her? How are her children doing? Was she still married? Betty didn't know any of this, but she almost didn't care anymore. Kate had chosen her own path. No one had forced her to give up her mother. Of course, it was hard for Betty to accept at first, but she realized that it had been a one-sided love all her life. Kate had never loved her in her life. Ever since she was a child, she had been a cruel and cynical person. A year passed. Summer had come to town again. All the ghosts of the past are slowly fading away, and in the family's memory, now they strive to keep in touch and help each other every day. Betty mostly helped with cooking and childcare. She gave various pieces of advice but did not push. Parents should decide for themselves how to raise their children. Peter loved her very much. Of course, he was still quite small, but he had already long ago pronounced the word grandmother. Betty was very happy about that. Things were getting better with Thomas too. He became more understanding and serious. He had only finished second grade, but he already felt like a big scholar. He liked math best of all. It was the exact science that attracted him the most. With math, I can explain a lot of things, he said. I was told that when I am older, I will be able to study physics, chemistry, and geometry. I'm really looking forward to that. The families went to the lake as usual, had picnics, and of course, swam in the pool. Only now the idea of a treasure hunt was no longer so popular. Maybe there was something else stored here, but they had had enough of the story of the previous year. But one night, that family idyll was disturbed again. The ghosts of the past decided to pay a visit to the present. The clock read about 3 o'clock. Everyone was sound asleep. Betty was resting in her separate house and Peter and his parents in their bedroom. Suddenly, Daria heard some noise downstairs. She tried to wake up her husband, but he slept like a dead man. Then the girl threw on a robe and slowly went downstairs. She was terribly scared, especially because she had seen many horror movies, how maniacs or ghosts descend on victims. But this time the movies were right, and her intuition didn't let her down. Daria stepped out onto the stairs and looked down. There she saw 2 men in black masks. Her heart sank into her heels. Real burglars. She should sound the alarm. The first thing she did was to wake her husband. She turned, but beneath her there was a treacherous creak of the touloup. The girl stopped. The light of flashlights was immediately directed at her. Daria realized that she had been seen. She slowly raised her hands and just as slowly began to turn around. There were 2 useless muzzles staring at her, and each could shoot her at any moment. Descending past someone's male voice from beneath the mask, Daria decided not to test her fate and began to slowly descend the stairs. She was shivering, and her husband, as luck would have it, didn't even hear the whole thing. As she descended, she accidentally hit a vase, which shattered. This should have caused a commotion and gotten Leo's attention. But there was only silence on all sides. The masked robber took a wooden chair and placed it in the center of the room. "Sit down," he commanded. The girl obeyed. As soon as she sat down, he pressed her against the back of the chair with a sharp movement. And his partner began to fiddle Daria with the rope. "Where is your husband?" The rough voice asked again. "In the bedroom on the second." Quiet as a mouse, Daria took a risk. After these words, her mouth was taped shut. She tried to say something else, but now only mumbled. She was crying with hopelessness and didn't know what to do. Meanwhile, the robber went up to the second floor and forcibly lifted Leo from the bed. The guy was sleepy, so he did not even immediately realize what was happening. But the thief did not even take any chances. He immediately knocked out the owner of the house with a blow with a heavy buttstock. Leo collapsed to the floor. The muscular masked thief easily lifted the guy up and laid him on one shoulder. He brought him downstairs and sat him next to the girl who was holding on and trying to get out. Their chairs were tied together so that only their backs were touching. They couldn't even look at each other. After about 5 minutes, Leo woke up, although there was no point in it anymore. He was as disarmed as Daria had been, and his mouth was taped shut. "But finally, you're both awake." "But at last you're both awake," said a familiar female voice. Daria couldn't understand where she'd heard it. But when the woman took off her mask, everything fell into place. It turned out to be Kate again. Her partner didn't remove the mask. Probably didn't want to reveal his anonymity. "Tell me where the chest is." She ordered the guys indifferently, pointing the muzzle of the gun at them. Daria was silent. Kate thought she had something to say, so she signaled her partner to rip off the duct tape. But instead of locating the treasure, Daria blurted out, "You're going to die in hell, bitch." After these words, she was immediately put back on the tape and slapped in the face. And you, hubby, drinking, pumping information from Leo. Surrounding around him also something clever you want to say. How did your wife leave? The man shook his head from side to side, trying to free himself. So you're all going to keep quiet. Am I right? Kate asked a rhetorical question in a haughty tone. Well, then I'll have to motivate you in other ways. She nodded to her partner and he went upstairs. Daria immediately guessed why he was going up there, or rather, who was he going after? She started kicking, lashing out, bringing a chair, but it was all to no avail. When Kate's partner returned with their son, Daria nearly fainted. Tears streamed from her eyes. The robber was holding her son's hand, and he was sleepy and kept wanting to fall somewhere. The man put him on the sofa. The sleepy Peter, fortunately, didn't even realize what was happening. He just lay down on the couch and went back to sleep. Kate came even closer to Daria, standing face to face, and whispered, "Oh, why are we crying?" Yes, it's good for a mother to cry when her son is in danger. She pointed the gun at Pedya, the defenseless child who was sleeping peacefully on the couch. Daria was thrown into a shiver. She screamed as hard as she could, but only pitiful mooing came out. The tears were flowing. Kate came up to her again and ripped the tape off. Daria was in tremendous pain, but she wasted no time and screamed, "Don't you dare touch him." She was immediately gagged. But now Daria hoped that someone would hear her screams. And they did. Betty woke up from her fitful sleep to hear the screaming. At first, she thought she was imagining it. To be sure, she looked out the window, which looked directly onto Daria and Leo's house. She noticed that there was an unnatural blue light in one of the windows. She lost her eyes. The light didn't go away. Something's wrong flashed through her mind. She threw on her robe, and as she passed the barn, she picked up a shovel just in case. She walked quietly to the house and opened the door cautiously. Before her stood a monstrous picture of Daria and Leo sitting tied up. Daria is sobbing. Leo is trying to get out of those ropes. Her daughter is here again. She and her partner threaten to kill little Pedya, pointing a gun at him if his parents don't tell him where the chest is. Betty is terrified, not thinking what she is doing. Runs up to Kate and gives her the hardest slap of her life. Kate even staggered back in surprise. "What the hell are you doing?" Betty yelled, "Get out of here, old woman, and stay out of my way." Kate snapped at her and started pushing Daria again. "Your child is going to die because of your selfishness. Is that what you want to do? You're committing a crime. There's no more treasure here. How could there be?" Kate smirked. All the while her partner stood with the gun pointed at the child. Betty, realizing the dire situation, grabbed the shovel she had brought with her, and as hard as she could, hit the bandit in the head. She missed a little bit, but she hit him with the edge of the shovel. The man started to shoot out of surprise and pain. Betty immediately rushed to Peter, protecting him with her body. One bullet hit the ceiling and another bullet hit Kate's heart. She looked at her partner in horror and collapsed to the floor a second later. She didn't even have time to say anything. Her breathing immediately stopped. Her heart stopped beating. Taking advantage of the situation, Leo finally freed himself from the ropes and twisted the bandit's hands behind his back. "Call the police," he shouted to Betty. She did exactly as he said. It didn't take long for the police to arrive, but Leo had already tied the bandit's hands, put him on the couch, and pointed a gun at him. Daria, meanwhile, took her son in her arms, carried him upstairs, and kissed him for a long time. "It's okay, sweetheart, it's okay," she told him, hugging him as tightly as she could. The policeman rushed into the house with guns and ordered everyone to raise their hands and surrender. The bandit made an attempt to escape, but he failed. "I didn't know you were such a fighting woman, Betty," Leo jokingly remarked as the criminal and Kate's body were taken away. Betty sat on the couch. Not alive, not dead. She was asked something, but she didn't understand and couldn't answer. Her heart was squeezing terribly. When they realized she was sick, they called an ambulance. And just in time. The clinic said she'd had a heart attack. Betty woke up the next day. White room, white ceiling, a nurse injecting something into her vein. "Your relatives will come to see you soon," she said and left. A few minutes later, Daria, Leo from Peter, Thomas, and his parents burst into the room. They were all very concerned. Thomas had brought flowers, Peter a balloon, and Daria had brought Betty her favorite raspberry jam that she had made herself. "Is this all for me?" the woman wondered. "It's for you, Grandma Betty," Thomas exclaimed and wrapped Betty in his arms. "We're so glad you're feeling better. We were worried sick about you," Daria said. "Oh, what a confounding thing to say, Betty." Betty spent another week in the hospital. Every day someone visited her, either Leo and Daria or Thomas and his parents, who shared news about everything that was going on in the world. "Oh, and also when you get there, we're going to throw a cool party for you," he informed me. Only it was a secret. Jokingly scolded Betty when she was discharged. She still had to use a wheelchair for another month. But that wasn't a problem, for they now had a large car on which they could load anything. Finally, she was brought to her home. Leo loaded the stroller, put Betty in it, and took her into the house. As soon as the door opened, the lights came on and inflatable balloons flew up to the ceiling. Everyone was standing there with presents and cake. And with glee you shouted surprise. Betty thanked everyone heartily and sat down at the table. As she looked around the house, the memories of the past night cut through her mind like a knife. Her daughter had died and she hadn't even felt a thing. She felt bitter and ashamed of her indifference to her death. But she was terribly afraid for the fate of Daria and her son Peter, who were on the verge of death. Could it be that her true love lay in them now? By the end of the evening, Betty was informed that her daughter's partner had been given several years in prison. Just like that, Betty had a real loving family in her declining years. They appreciated, respected, and loved her for the rest of her days. Daria became like a daughter to Betty. She faithfully cared for her even when Betty herself was already quite ill. But for now, she had another full 10 years of productive and happy life ahead of her. Daria and her husband always remained sensitive and understanding. And when someone said that according to the documents they were not related and therefore could not be a real family, Betty only grinned in response. After all, a real family is not only people who have blood ties. It is those who love, respect, and care for each other. It's not just about blood, it's also about heart.